Chapter 1985. Yi Qianqian struggled a little, but there was no doubt that it was of no use at all. Therefore, a certain someone pounced on her without hesitation. Well, after all, the atmosphere of the wedding night was exactly what they wanted. Yi Qianqian thought about it and let him do as he pleased. However, the price she paid was a little heavy. After a carefree night, Yi Qianqian's body, which was about to fall apart from exhaustion, was tormented even more. The next day, Yi Qianqian didn't even want to open her eyes. However, Shun Julia still woke her up and said, "Wake up. Grandma and Mom and Dad are waiting for us to serve them tea." Yi Qianqian felt uncomfortable all over. She whimpered and didn't want to move at all. Shun Julia tugged at her. Yi Qianqian reached out and patted his body lazily. She was weak. "Come, I'll help you brush your teeth. I'll sleep a little longer." 10 minutes. Yi Qianqian closed her eyes and lay on the pillow, pulling the blanket over her head. Shun Julia, who was standing by the side, asked, "What if Grandma gets mad later?" Yi Qianqian was speechless. "Wife." Yi Qianqian was speechless. "Hey, Grandma, why are you here?" When she heard that, Yi Qianqian immediately covered her body and looked up. But where was Grandma? Shun Julia saw that and chuckled. He pulled her up and said, "All right, come back and continue sleeping after the tea." Yi Qianqian still felt weak when she heard that. She looked at the time. It was only 6 o'clock. She raised her hand lazily and said, "Carry me." Shun Juliet carried her to the bathroom and squeezed some toothpaste for her. Yi Qianqian chased him out and locked the door from the inside before slowly locking it. After taking a shower, he walked out of the bathroom. When she came out, she found that her face looked as if it had been squeezed dry. Yi Qianqian put on a towel and walked out. Her body was still sore. Shun Julia was lying on the bed and almost fell asleep. When he saw her walking over, he immediately got up and rummaged through her clothes. He found a red cheongsam. The cheongsam was very exquisite. It was a spring dress. After putting it on Yi Qianqian, it looked delicate and exquisite. Shun Julia couldn't help but plant a kiss on her lips. "My wife is so beautiful." Yi Qianqian pouted and said, "Let's go. Comb your hair and blow dry it." Shun Julia had no choice but to take a towel to dry her hair. "You look terrible. Let's wait until you look better before we go out." "Okay." Yi Qianqian let him play with her and almost fell asleep again. Her body was aching. When the sound of the hairdryer stopped, she immediately straightened up. After applying a little makeup cream on her face, her complexion finally looked better. Outside, Nanny had already prepared the tea. When he saw them coming out, he brought the tray over. Yi Qianqian had never eaten pork before, but she had at least seen a pig run. She carried the tray over and knelt down with Shun Julia. She raised the tray over her head and said, "Grandma, please have some tea." Old Mrs. Shun was all smiles. It was rare for her to be in such a good mood. Nodding her head in satisfaction, she took the tea and took a sip. She said, "My good granddaughter-in-law, get up. Grandma will give you a big red packet." Shun Julia didn't expect Yi Qianqian to be so perceptive. The corners of his mouth turned up. He was in a wonderful mood. Shun Longyue and Mrs. Shun did the same. After the tea was served, the whole family naturally had breakfast together. Now that the new wife was married, she naturally had to go out to meet the guests. Just as old Mrs. Shun was about to lead Yi Qianqian out, Yi Qianqian was stunned. "More than 2 million words have been written. Thank you for your persistence. We're going to do a small event. We're going to pick 10 people from Zhongping to give 888 book coins. Heart, the new book, 99 Days of Hidden Marriage. Chief, please be reserved, is already fat." Chapter 1986. She hugged the door tightly and looked at Shun Julia for help. "Hubby, didn't you say..." Shun Julia didn't expect things to turn out this way. He cleared his throat and said, "Well, she should be back soon, right?" When Shun Julia said this, he felt guilty. She glanced at old Mrs. Shun with a questioning look. Old Mrs. Shun glanced at it and said, "We still have to go to Dongfang for lunch. We'll be back in the afternoon." Yi Qianqian felt like she was about to faint. She was really sleepy. Shun Julia's heart ached for her, and he said, "Grandma, why don't we do it another day? Qian must be exhausted from the past few days. How can that be? I've already told my old sisters that it can't be changed. Old Mrs. Shun looked displeased and said, Who told you not to worry about your wife? It's fine, Qian. We'll be back in the afternoon. Oh, be a good girl and follow Grandma. Qian felt that she was about to be abducted and sold. When she saw how happy her grandmother was, she compromised and said, All right, let's go. Old Mrs. Shun immediately beamed. He grabbed Qian's hand and quickly left. After the ordeal, Qian felt as if she had seen a ghost. She felt much better. After dinner, she returned home. Shun Jiliya wasn't home. Shun Luo and was sitting on the sofa with the baby in his arms, coaxing him. It was rare for Qian to see such a young child. She went forward and called out, Big brother, is the baby asleep? Shun Luo and didn't raise his head. He replied in a low voice, No. Do you want a hug? All Qian wanted to do was hug the baby and bask in a happy atmosphere. When she heard that, she reached out her hands. Shun Luo and didn't look up. He reached out and handed the baby to her. She didn't know why. Even though she hadn't seen his face, she felt that this man seemed a little sad. He couldn't help but take a few more glances. However, Shun Luo and seemed to be prepared. He quickly got up and turned to leave. Qian watched his back as he entered the public bathroom. Soon, she heard the sound of the door closing. Her voice wasn't loud, but at that moment, Qian's heart felt empty. The baby was very obedient. At that moment, he was looking at Qian with a pair of round eyes. He opened his mouth slightly and stuck out his tongue. Qian couldn't help but smile. She hugged him and sat down. Nanny, he had just returned from watering the plants. When she saw Qian carrying the baby, she couldn't help but ask, Where's Master? Where's the bathroom? Oh. Nanny, he put down the watering can and wiped her hands on her apron. She walked up to her and said, Second young mistress. Eldest young master doesn't look very happy. I think he misses his mother. If you have nothing better to do, try to comfort him. The child's mother was Shin Manting. Was Shin Manting really dead? Qian couldn't believe it. But if Shin Manting wasn't dead, where was she? While he was deep in thought, he heard the bathroom door open. Shun Luo and seemed to have just washed his face. He walked over and said, Give it to me. Go rest for a while. Look at your face. Qian subconsciously touched her face and looked into his eyes. Shun Luo and quickly looked away and said, Jiliya went out with Luo Ran. He asked you to rest when you came back. You don't have to look for him. Chapter 1987. Shun Luo and responded in a low voice and carried the child back to his room. Qian returned to her room. She had thought that she would lie down and immediately fall asleep. But unexpectedly, she was very energetic. Her mind was full of thoughts, and her mind was full of Shun Manting and Shun Luo. And Shun Jiliya said that she was dead, but Shun Luo and looked sad sometimes, but he didn't mourn the death of his wife. Although it was a little wicked to think that way, no matter how she looked at it, it was impossible for Shun Manting to die. After thinking about it again and again, she picked up her phone. Of course, she couldn't have Shun Manting's WeChat, but there was someone who definitely had it. Sisai, Yiyu, are you there? Yiyu seemed to be very free and immediately replied, Yes. Sisai, do you have Shun Manting's WeChat? No. With our previous relationship, do you think we would have each other's WeChat? When Qian saw this, she actually felt that it was very reasonable. Sisai, do you know who has it? Shun Jiliya, Shun Luo, and your parents-in-law. Qian straightened up and immediately called Shun Jiliya. Shun Jiliya was bragging to a group of friends, showing off the wedding ring and the superiority of a groom. At that moment, when he saw that his wife was calling, he proudly picked up the phone, waved it, and said, Hey, my wife is calling. She's so clingy. I can't help it. The group of guys immediately sighed and waved their hands disdainfully. Shun Jiliya helplessly shook his head and sighed. You are all jealous of me. Don't you know that jealousy makes people ugly? You guys are very ugly. Then he immediately picked up the phone and said, Honey, what's wrong? Do you have Shun Manting's WeChat? Qian went straight to the point. When Shun Jiliya heard that, He was silent for a moment before saying, "Why did you suddenly think of her? You told Big Brother that she was dead, but from his reaction, it doesn't seem like Shinmanting is dead. I want to try looking for her." Julia frowned and asked, "Honey, what are you trying to do? I think Big Brother's been in a bad mood recently. He's in a daze every day and looks very sad. Moreover, the baby needs his mother. If Shinmanting is not dead, let's find her and bring her back. The baby needs a complete family." "That's right," Shinmanting said. Julia's expression darkened. After some thought, he said, "All right, I'll take a look." Then, he hung up the phone and scrolled through his WeChat contact list. Luo ran, and the others looked over and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. I have something to do. I'll be leaving first. You guys enjoy yourselves." Io, his buddies jeered. "It's so different after getting married. One phone call from your wife, and you have to rush back. Poor single dogs like us." Julia was even more pleased with himself and said, "Just you wait, you ugly fellows." As he spoke, he had already picked up his car keys and walked out. He scrolled through and confirmed that Shinmanting's WeChat contact was indeed there. However, when he tried to send a message, the other party rejected it. Clearly, he had been blacklisted. He opened his WeChat moments, but it was also blank. When he got home, Julia went into his room. Chapter 1988. What a heartless woman. However, Yi Qianqian's words reminded him of something. Shen Luo, and had always referred to Shinmanting as dead. However, it didn't make sense that he didn't even mention a word about her funeral. Well, he had been negligent. He had been busy with the wedding and hadn't paid attention to this kind of thing. Now that he thought about it carefully, he found that there were loopholes everywhere. He picked up Yi Qianqian's phone and searched for Shinmanting's WeChat number. He soon found it. Nickname, Mopey, Loving Heart. He sent a friend request, but there was no response for a long time. Would Shinmanting be looking for a job at this time? After all, people had to eat. After thinking about it, Julia sent another friend request. "Hello, I saw your resume on the internet." However, he couldn't type any more words. He sent it over, but there was still no response. He wasn't surprised, but he was still a little disappointed. Julia put the phone back. He was also exhausted. He went to the bathroom to wash up and went to bed with her. However, when he was about to fall asleep, he heard Yi Qianqian's phone ring. He suddenly got up and took her phone. He unlocked it, but found it was only a Weibo gossip notification. He was disappointed again. Suddenly, there was a soft sound. On the top of the notification bar, the big words were clear. "Mopey accepted your friend request." Julia was shocked and immediately opened it. However, before he could send anything, it showed that the other party was typing. "Mopey Heart. Hello, I'm Shinmanting. May I know which company you are from?" Oh my God. Julia didn't know how to react for a moment. It turned out to be really Shinmanting. Sitting on the bed, Julia had a strong urge to shake Yi Qianqian awake. However, his reason prevailed over his impulse. Julia especially clicked on Yi Qianqian's WeChat moments to take a look. The latest post was of her taking a picture of the wedding scene with a crying emoji. "Getting married is so tiring. I'm going to draw a manga in the future. The name will be, What's the Experience of Marrying into a Traditional Family? It'll definitely be popular." Fire. Julia was shocked when he saw it. As expected, this post was blocked from many people. This guy. Julia smiled and scrolled down. There didn't seem to be any information that exposed her husband or family. Heaving a sigh of relief, he set his WeChat moments to display only 3 days, then replied, "Hello, I'm an editor of the Eurasian Comics Imperial Capital Branch. I'm in charge of recruitment. After looking at your resume, I feel that you're very suitable for our job requirements." Shinmanting, who was far away in Jiangnan, was shocked to hear such a rigid reply. Eurasian Comics? This was O Ming's company. Yu Lily used to work there, and she often dropped by. However, a branch company in the imperial capital. A branch office in the imperial capital? Subconsciously, he glanced at his profile picture. It was blank, followed by a chinchilla's butt. He clicked on this person's WeChat moments. He seemed to have gotten married recently. The other posts were all about work and promoting the comic. It should be true. Shinmanting confirmed it and asked, "Are you from the capital? Which website did you see it on?" Just as he was at his wit's end, Yi Qianqian opened her eyes. Chapter 1989. Shen Jilie's eyes immediately lit up when he saw Yi Qianqian. He said, "My dear wife, you're here just in time. You're here to save the day," replied his sister Manting. Sister Manting? Yi Qianqian immediately perked up. Shen Manting? Yeah. Shen Jilia nodded. I can't reveal my identity. If I do, she might blacklist us. So, I pretended to be from Eurasian Comics. What do you mean by pretending? Yi Qianqian took the phone. I'm from Eurasian Comics. Yi Qianqian looked at the chat history and replied, I saw your email in my mailbox. Didn't you send it yourself? Mopey Heart. Well, I sent in one go. I didn't check the company. Sisai. Oh, Sisai. Miss Shun, have you never worked before? Mopey Heart. Yes, but I've never been in the field of comics. Sisai, you don't need to have any experience in comics. We're mainly looking for talents in the marketing department. You must be able to work hard. Your resume looks good. If you're interested, you're welcome to come for an interview. Mopey Heart. I'm not in the capital. Does that mean you're not coming back? Yi Qianqian was a little surprised. She was about to reply when Shen Jilia stopped her. What are you trying to say? Shen Jilia asked. Ask her to come back. Yi Qianqian said matter-of-factly. Come to the capital. Why do you want to? If you insist, people will think you're a multi-level marketer with bad intentions. I'll do it. As he spoke, Shen Jilia had already taken the phone from her. Sisai, it's okay. Think about it. Yi Qianqian panicked when she saw that and said, If you say that, people will come back. I don't want to come back. If she doesn't come back later, it's all your fault. What's the rush? Mopey Heart. Okay, thank you. Sisai, 5 days off and 2 days off. The base salary is 5,000, and there will be a commission. The marketing department has a hard time. You may have to work overtime. The overtime pay is $20 an hour. Yi Qianqian was stunned. For a newcomer, isn't this too much? No. Shen Jilia's expression was natural. She must have found quite a number of jobs. The salary isn't low, but it's not excessive either. Mopey Heart. Okay, thank you. Sisai. There's a staff dormitory and a 3-month trial period. After that, you'll be able to purchase 5 insurances and 1 housing fund. The benefits are quite good, and you'll be able to enjoy all kinds of holidays. If you want to come, you can come and see. Where are you now? Mopey Love, Jiangsu. Sisai, I'm alright. I hope you can consider it. We are eager for talents to join us. Shake hands. Hey, what a straight and official tone. One look, and you can tell that it's a man speaking. Yi Qianqian said with a look of disdain. I'm a man to begin with. Besides, isn't that what recruitment is all about? It's fast and accurate. Shen Jilia looked at her. The conditions are tempting. It's just a matter of whether she's willing to come. Yi Qianqian had a bad feeling about this. Why didn't you tell the truth? Why would we lie to her? I think that even if we trick her here, she will definitely hate us when she finds out that it's not true. Chapter 1990. Then you're still lying. Yi Qianqian felt indignant. It's different now that we're in a different company. Yeah. Shen Jilia hugged his wife. That's true, but I think there must be some misunderstanding between her and my brother. Look at how depressed Big Brother has been recently. He's been taking care of the child and doesn't even go to the lab much. Yi Qianqian could tell. But was it really appropriate to lie to Shen Manting like that? She might even think that we're working together to lie to her. Wouldn't Big Brother be in an even more awkward situation then? Shen Jilia actually felt that Yi Qianqian's words made sense. But the net had already been cast. Could it be retracted? It was too late. Now it all depended on whether Shen Manting would agree. Shen Jilia was sleepy. He closed his eyes and fell asleep with his wife in his arms. However, Yi Qianqian felt much better after waking up. She took out her phone and scrolled through Weibo. Recently, a certain positive male star with a particularly good image had suddenly been exposed by a woman. It was suspected that the male star had cheated her of her money and feelings. She scrolled through the comments. The comments were all questioning the male star's belief in his ex-girlfriend's words. Yi Qianqian couldn't help but sigh. Just as she was feeling emotional, she suddenly received a message. Hello, I'll be in the capital in a few days. Wasn't the sender Shen Manting? Yi Qianqian was overjoyed. She immediately shook Shinjilia and shouted, "Hubby, look!" Shin Manting replied. Shinjilia had always been a light sleeper. He had already woken up when she suddenly got excited. When he heard this, he replied, "What did she say?" "She said she'll be in the capital in a few days." Shin Manting actually arrived in the capital the next day. She found a cheap guest house online. She laid out her own bed sheets and used her own toiletries. 100 yuan a day was considered very cheap in the imperial capital. Although the neighborhood was a little old, it was quite safe. She hadn't settled down for a long time. She carried her luggage and did some odd jobs. She quietly became a backpacker and wandered around the Jiangnan area. As for her resume, she received it every day. She also received phone calls and WeChat messages every day. However, it was either the salary was too low or the position was not ideal. Now, the reason why she decided to come to the capital was not only because of the generous treatment offered by the contact person, but also because she wanted to see her child. He didn't stay long. Just come quietly and leave quietly. After she was done, she changed into a fresh set of clothes and took the subway to a place near the Shun residence. This was a relatively leisurely residential area. There were also many office buildings, so there were quite a lot of people coming and going. Shin Manting disguised herself and sat on a bench in the park with her phone in her hand. She wanted to send a message to Shen Luo, but she felt that it was inappropriate. She didn't want to be with Shen Luo, so she gave up on the child. However, blood was thicker than water. That kinship was not something she could give up just because she wanted to. During this period of time, all she could think about was Little Moon. Even in her dreams, she missed him. However, he couldn't bring himself to do so. Shin Manting hesitated for a long time before she switched off the screen. However, the phone vibrated slightly. Shin Manting picked up the phone and took a closer look. It was Shen Luoan. Shen Luoan, it's you? Shin Manting was stunned, and then she was shocked again. Chapter 1991. Shin Manting's heart raced when she saw the words that popped up on her phone. Almost reflexively, he looked around. Soon, she saw a figure coming up from behind. The figure was tall, but much thinner than the last time she saw him. He had lost weight. He was obviously thinner. Shin Manting's heart ached slightly, but she reacted quickly and immediately got up. She subconsciously wanted to leave. However, Shen Luo quickly stepped forward and chased after her. Shin Manting ran faster when she heard the movement behind her, but there was still a huge gap in strength. Shin Luo caught up with her in a short while and grabbed her hand. Shin Manting was shocked and immediately flung her hand away as if she had been electrocuted. However, her hand was held tightly and didn't move at all. "Why are you here?" Shin Luo looked at her and frowned. "I told you, it's useless for you to regret it. Why did you come here and leave as soon as you saw me?" "Why? What could she do?" Shin Manting looked at Shen Luo and opened her mouth. She wanted to speak, but she didn't know what to say. She wanted to see her child. She wanted to see her baby. That seemed to be the right thing to do. But Shin Manting didn't dare to say it. Shin Manting pulled her hand away and lowered her head. "I just passed by and thought of sitting here." "Passing by?" Shen Luo was amused. "The capital is so big. Why don't you pass by in a fifth or fourth ring? Can you afford to live in a house here in your current situation? Don't you think you're deliberately extending yourself here?" Shen Luo's words were sharp. Shin Manting only felt a burst of pain in her heart, and her eyes were a little sore. She pulled her hand back and said in a low voice, "It's none of your business. It's not like you own this place. Did I offend you by sitting here?" Shen Luo was speechless for a moment. Indeed, it didn't bother him. But as soon as he saw her, he couldn't control himself. God knew that when he saw her just now, Shen Luo felt that his heart was about to jump out. After staring at her for a while, he finally mustered up the courage to send a message to confirm. After seeing her pick up her phone, he came forward. He was afraid that he would be scolded as a psychopath like the previous few times. "Do you want to see the child?" Shen Luo asked. Yes. He was thinking like a madman. Shin Manting's heart skipped a beat, and she looked up at him. However, he didn't dare to say a word. He had said not to regret it. She now regretted it. Shin Luo was right in front of her, Shun Manting could imagine that there would be a round of humiliation. The baby is fine, Shun Luo interrupted her. He's growing more and more adorable. He's eating well and sleeping well. He's spending more and more time awake. Don't worry, I'll take good care of him. This string of words was spoken in a calm voice. It was just a statement. However, Shun Manting's heart skipped a beat. The unbearable, surging sourness surged up in an instant. The baby was fine, but she couldn't even see it. Shun Luo and noticed the change in her expression. He turned his face away and said, I've told you about the child's recent situation. Don't pass by again in the future. There are people here who know you. It'll be embarrassing if they see you. Was he saying that she was an embarrassment? Shun Manting looked up angrily at his back and shouted, Shun Luo and... Chapter 1992. Shun Manting struggled in silence for a long time before she found her voice. Her heart ached, and she said with difficulty, I want to see the baby. Shun Luo's back was facing her. When he heard this, he inexplicably breathed a sigh of relief. He straightened his body slightly and then turned sideways. He saw Shun Manting's blushing face and seemed to be ashamed. He felt a little complicated, but his face was serious. He stared at her and said slowly, I said that as long as you don't go back that day, the child will have nothing to do with you in the future. That's not up to you. Shun Manting looked up and clenched her fists slightly. I gave birth to the baby. I won't abandon him. But you didn't come back that day. Shun Luo and faced her with a somewhat sarcastic smile on his face. I begged you so much, but you still refused to come back. Now you have the cheek to say that you want this child? Shun Manting frowned and looked up. A man's words carry weight. Shun Luo and looked at her. Unlike you women, who only know how to move your lips. As for the rest, He looked up and down at Shun Manting with disdain. You can't do anything. I didn't say that I don't want this child. Shun Manting's face was full of anger. You have acquiesced. Now the child is in my hands, and I have the chat records here. Even if you go to the court will only award the child to me. Then I also have custody. You don't. Shun Luo and replied coldly and glanced at her. Don't you feel ashamed when you say that? Shun Luo and Shun Manting lowered her head slightly and said in a choked voice, I didn't come back to quarrel with you. Now I want to see the child, just one look. One look. I can show you the photo, Shun Luo said, and actually picked up the phone. Shun Manting subconsciously looked at it with desire in her eyes. He had a photo, but she didn't even have a photo. Shun Luo had been watching her. He looked through it and then handed the phone to her. Shun Manting subconsciously wanted to take it, but Shun Luo didn't let go. Give it to me, Shun Manting said anxiously. Let me see. This is a cell phone. It's a valuable item. What if you take it away? Shun Luo's voice was calm, but his words were extremely insulting. Shun Manting was so angry that her neck and eyes turned red. You're such a despicable person. Even if I were poor, I wouldn't steal your cell phone. Shun Luo didn't continue the conversation. He raised his eyelids, held the phone in his hand, and said, Do you want to see it? Shun Manting resisted the urge to look at him. It was Little Moon. There were only a few wrinkled and red photos on her phone, but the video on Shun Luo's phone showed that the baby had grown up a lot. Her little face was white and tender, becoming very smooth. In the video on the phone, the baby's mouth was slightly open, and he was sucking on his little finger. Saliva was dripping from the corner of his mouth. Oh my, it's dirty, Mrs. Shun's voice. Shun Manting's vision blurred when she heard this voice after a long time. He rubbed his eyes and stared at her. The baby's finger was pulled out, bringing along a silver thread. His little tongue moved, and then his little face wrinkled. He was about to cry. Soon, he was carried up, and Mrs. Shun's figure appeared in the mirror. Chapter 1993. Although Mrs. Shun said so, she didn't step aside. She picked up the bottle that had been prepared beside her, tested the temperature, and stuffed it into the baby's mouth. The baby looked like he was about to cry, but he was gone in an instant. He sucked on the bottle, clenched his fists, held the bottle, and sucked in big mouthfuls. Mrs. Shun held Little Moon in her arms, and there was a happy smile on her face. What a happy family. Shenmanting felt very complicated. Looking at the baby in the video, her desire to get close to him and hug him grew stronger. Are you done? Shenluo and put the phone away. Shenmanting was anxious and reached out to grab it. However, she grabbed Shenluo's other hand. He put his hand in front of her and looked at her indifferently. Shenmanting's heart skipped a beat, and she withdrew her hand guiltily. Leave if you're done, Shenluo said rudely and kicked the phone back into his pocket. I have to go home to see my son. His words were very tempting to Shenmanting. She also wanted to see the baby, and she also wanted to see Little Moon. But how could she say it? Shenmanting's lips moved, but she still didn't say a word. Shenluo glanced at her, then turned around and walked away. He didn't hesitate, and he didn't stop. Shenmanting watched as he walked further and further away, and her heart became more and more empty. Shenmanting followed him silently, and she crossed her arms and looked at his back. Shenluo seemed to notice it, and he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Shenmanting didn't avoid him. She walked forward, lowered her head slightly, and said, Shenluo, I want to see him. Haven't you finished watching? Shenluo didn't turn around, and his back was facing her. What else do you want? You know that I don't just want to watch the video. Shenmanting bit her lower lip, and her voice gradually trembled and choked with sobs. I haven't seen him for a long time. Shenluo pulled a long face. You asked for it. With that, he sneered, and then walked forward quickly. His pace was more than twice as fast as before. Shenmanting knew that she was in the wrong, but the desire to see the baby in her heart grew stronger. She looked at him and followed silently. Hey! A neighbor was surprised to see Shenmanting. Manting, you're back. Shenmanting's face stiffened, and she stopped moving. Shenluo kept walking in the direction of his house. For some reason, Shenmanting felt a chill run down her spine when she looked at her neighbor. He didn't chase her away, but Shenmanting's footsteps seemed to be frozen at this moment. His figure went further and further away, and soon he disappeared. The neighbor looked at Shenmanting, then at Shenluo and asked, did they quarrel? When he took a closer look, he exclaimed, Io, why does your complexion look so bad? You've lost so much weight. You used to be chubby. Shenmanting felt her entire body stiffen. She quickly turned around and said, You got the wrong person. Then he quickly walked back. His footsteps were getting faster and faster, faster and faster, and finally he was running. Her heart was beating fast, and she was gasping for breath. Tears were already streaming down her cheeks. He calmed himself down, wiped his eyes, and immediately took the subway back. Shenluo didn't look back as he walked. He didn't know when Shenmanting had stopped following him. Chapter 1994. He didn't know why, but he suddenly couldn't hold his breath any longer. Standing at his door, Shenluo sat down on the steps. The wind blew gently, and the flowers in the courtyard swayed. Spring was here. The surroundings were filled with lush greenery. The flowers that should have bloomed had all bloomed. Those who were supposed to be defeated had been defeated. He didn't know how long he had been sitting on the steps, watching the sun get smaller and smaller. He actually felt a little like a lunatic. Huh. Shenluo stood up, patted the dust, and muttered to himself, Isn't that a lunatic? He turned around and entered the house. As soon as he entered, he heard Little Moon crying loudly. Seeing Shenluo in return, Nanny He, who was at her wit's end, finally breathed a sigh of relief and said, Come and hug your son. He's crying so hard that he didn't pee or defecate. He won't even drink milk. I don't know what's wrong with him. Shenluo took it and stared at the baby for a long time. He slowly said, He probably misses Mom. Stop it. Nanny He rebuked. He doesn't even know who Mom is. How can he miss Mom? Please don't catch a cold. When Madam comes back later, let her take a look at him. But it was amazing. After Shenluo hugged the baby for a while, Little Moon's crying gradually subsided, and he started to hiccup. Nanny He teased, I don't think he misses Mom. He misses Dad. Little Moon stopped crying and stared at Shenluo with his dark, watery eyes. Are you hungry? Luo and held the baby with one hand and stood up to get the bottle for him. The milk in the bottle was freshly brewed, so the temperature was just right. He stuffed it into the baby's mouth, and he immediately hugged it. Luo and was usually tired from work and in a bad mood. As long as he came home and saw the baby and hugged him, he would naturally relax. But today, he couldn't relax no matter what. After coaxing the baby to sleep, Luo sat on the bed in a daze. After a while, he went out. Julia and his wife sat in the living room, snuggling together and looking at their phones. Yi Qianqian occasionally reached out to tap on the screen. When she saw Luo, she said, "Big brother, it's almost time to eat." "Okay." Luo responded and then sat down. He picked up an orange and started to peel it. Julia's eyes were glued to the phone, but he didn't forget to glance up at Julia. Then he quickly put down his phone and said with a serious face, "Brother, I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" "It's bad," Luo replied. "In that case, I'll tell you the good news first." Yi Qianqian was speechless. Luo glanced at him. "What?" "I found out that Sister Manting is still alive. I contacted her yesterday and planned to arrange a job for her in the capital. I just didn't have the time to tell you." Julia coughed lightly, looking a little embarrassed. Luo paused in the act of peeling an orange and looked up at him. "Did you call Manting over?" Yi Qianqian and Julia's eyes widened when they heard Luo's question. Yi Qianqian asked, "Big brother, do you already know?" "Yeah." Luo tossed the orange peel away. "I saw it in the park." Yi Qianqian was even more shocked. "But wasn't she still in Jiangsu yesterday? She said she would only be back in a few days." Chapter 1995. The bad news is Luo hesitated and glanced at Yi Qianqian. Yi Qianqian cleared her throat and said, "It was his idea, not mine." "Hey, you sold your husband so quickly." Julia reached out to hold her in his arms and said, "We asked her to come to the capital and arranged a job for her in marketing or research. But I don't have such a job here." "Brother, you..." Luo squeezed the juice out of the orange in his hand. The fragrance of oranges filled the air. Yi Qianqian was envious of the fruits. She picked one up and started to peel it herself. Julia felt a little uncomfortable under her gaze. He coughed lightly and said, "In any case, you can just arrange for one of them. If it doesn't work out, I'll have no choice but to look for Yang Yi." Yang Yi had been one of Julia's brothers for many years. Although their relationship wasn't as close as Luo Rance, it was still passable. Right now, he was running a small logistics company. It wasn't big, but it was pretty decent. Working at Yang Ye's place is actually pretty good. It's just that it's a little tiring. Recently, he often works overtime and doesn't have enough sleep. He's so skinny that he looks like a dried corpse. When Luo heard this, he couldn't bring himself to eat the orange in his hand. He threw it into the dustbin and said coldly, "Why are you so nosy? What does this have to do with you? Manting is willing to be self-reliant. What's the difference between you and Charity? Do you think she will accept it?" Of course not. The poorer a person was, the more proud they were. He had always thought that he was unyielding and didn't need any external help. Otherwise, it would be considered as charity and food given in destitution. In particular, Manting had some mental problems. Her brain circuitry was not something that normal people like them could understand. When Julia heard Luo's words, he pursed his lips and said, "That's not true. She has to work too. It's not like she's afraid to do anything and just sit there doing nothing. That's called charity." "Ha!" Luo stood up and looked at him. "You don't know anything about Manting. If she finds out that you've tricked her into coming here, she'll probably be disgusted by the sight of you. Not to mention the job you've introduced her to you." After saying that, he turned around and went into the bathroom. The sound of running water could be heard. Yi Qianqian and Julia looked at each other. Luo felt extremely irritated. He hadn't seen Manting for a long time, and when he suddenly saw her today, he felt a little sorry for her. Not that he felt sorry for her, but for himself. Pathetic and pitiful. He was clearly a man, but he was so lowly that his mood was controlled by a woman. When she mentioned that she wanted to see the child, he actually thought, why don't we just leave it at that? Let her see the child. Maybe after seeing it, she wouldn't bear to leave. However, this thought only lasted for a moment. In the end, this thought was overcome by reason. He was still so calm that he was cruel. Shun Luo and you big fool. He washed his face and went out. Dinner was ready. After dinner, Shun Luo and returned to his room. The baby was very obedient, very obedient. He had been sleeping obediently for more than an hour. More than once, he wondered if it was because he knew his mother wasn't by his side that he was so quiet and rarely cried. He picked up his phone and thought for a moment. He typed a line of words in the chat window with Shun Manting, let's meet up. However, after thinking about it, he decided to delete it. He threw the phone aside and lay down. I encountered a small, unpleasant incident that affected my mood, so it's even later. I'll make 2 updates before 1 o'clock. Chapter 1996. Shun Luo closed his eyes. Before long, he heard his phone vibrate. Manting, let's meet. Shun Luo was stunned for a while when he saw these words. He stared at it for a while and subconsciously wanted to reply, okay. However, his eyes suddenly moved up and saw a row of messages. Every row was green, and every row was sent out by him. He had sent so many messages, but she hadn't even replied once. Shun Luo was suddenly angry. He deleted the word and then replied, what's the matter? Shun Manting could almost imagine what kind of expression he had on his face when he said those 3 words, distant and indifferent. It must be cold. It was the kind of coldness when looking at an enemy. Shun Manting was a little timid. If she asked him to meet, she would have to endure his sarcasm. If she mentioned the baby, would he say, you didn't want the baby, I gave you a chance? Then, he would dismiss her with 1 sentence. Shun Manting felt her heart beat heavy and slow. She looked at the 3 words for a long time and then replied, I think we need to talk. Shun Luo, I have nothing to talk to you about. The baby is mine. Shun Manting's heart trembled, and it was cold. This man was unbelievably heartless. Shun Manting, I gave birth to the baby. Shun Luo, didn't you say you didn't want it? The expected conversation was neither nutritious nor contentious, but it made Shun Manting stunned for a long time. Shun Manting was overwhelmed with sadness. She sat on the bed in a daze, and her heart sank. Ding dong. It was a WeChat notification. Shun Luo, if you can't eat, I can treat you to a meal. At 11 o'clock tomorrow, I will take the baby out to bask in the sun. Come over if you want to eat. Shun Manting was delighted and immediately replied, okay. After a while, Shun Luo replied, are you so poor? Has your dignity been eaten by a dog? Shun Manting's heart hurt, and she didn't want to reply. She threw the phone away and went to wash off the dust on her body. The next day, Shun Manting woke up at 7 o'clock. It would take an hour and a half to get there, which meant that she had an hour to tidy up. She took out the dress that she had treasured. The spring weather was just right to wear this long-sleeve dress. However, the dress she was wearing now was obviously a little too big. It looked wide and hung loosely on his body, not very fitting. However, she did not have a better dress. She carefully took out her old cosmetics. Although it had been some time, it shouldn't have expired. This was the first time she dressed up and put on makeup seriously since she left the Shun family. She looked into the mirror and saw another high-spirited Shun Manting. Good, perfect. The child had started to grow up. What if the child remembered her? Even if she couldn't have the baby, she still wanted to leave a good impression on him. She left the house and took the subway. Unlike yesterday, at this moment, many people on the train would look at Shun Manting. After arriving, she carried her bag and walked to the park. 10:50. Today's weather was very good. There were strong old men and women walking, playing ball games, and exercising together. The flowers were red and the grass was green. Shun Manting sat on the same bench as yesterday. She couldn't help but look around for fear that she might miss Shun Luo. However, after waiting for a full 20 minutes, they finally saw Shun Luo. Chapter 1997. Shun Manting was slightly taken aback and subconsciously looked behind her. However, it was really only Shun Luo. Where's the baby? Shin Manting frowned and felt that she had been deceived. Didn't you say that you brought the baby out to bask in the sun? The sun is so hot at this time. Do you want to burn the baby to death? Shin Luo and looked at her coldly and then looked her up and down. You were like a village woman yesterday. Are you planning to sell yourself today? Shin Manting heard this and almost rushed up to strangle him. She gritted her teeth and scolded him angrily. You lied to me, Shin Luo. Are you still a man? The old people in the park heard her voice and couldn't help but look over. Shin Luo and glanced at her disapprovingly and said, You know better than anyone whether I'm a man or not. His casual words easily stirred up the dark memories hidden in the depths of her mind. Shin Manting's face turned pale and she turned to leave. Her heart felt as if it had been stabbed by many sharp arrows. It was full of dense, bloody holes. Shin Luo and stood in front of her and reached out to grab her bag. He said, Aren't you going to eat? Let's go. I'll treat you. There's nothing delicious to eat with you. Shin Manting's shoulders were trembling with anger. Her eyes were slightly red, and she said angrily, Seeing you makes me lose my appetite. Shin Luo and acted as if he didn't hear her. He grabbed her bag with one hand and grabbed her wrist with the other. He said, Even if you lose your appetite, you can eat it. I'm already out. I have something to say to you. If you have something to say it now. Shin Luo and directly pulled her forward. The old people in the park looked at them and thought that it was a young couple quarreling. They didn't care and turned to continue. Shin Manting's eyes were red and she roared, Shin Luo, what do you want to eat? No. How about roast duck? No. Let go of me. How about Cantonese cuisine? Hunan cuisine? Sichuan cuisine? Shin Manting tried to pull her hand back, but it didn't budge. She panted and her breathing became heavy. I said I don't want to eat with you. Shin Luo, Anne's face finally darkened. He tightened his grip on her wrist and said in a low voice, Then who do you want to eat with? You dressed up like this. You seduced me in the past. Are you ready to resume your old career? Why are you always so full of yourself? I'm a woman. Shin Manting couldn't take it anymore and yelled. She choked with sobs. As a woman, can't I dress up a little? This is the first time I've put on makeup and put on a dress in a long time. I just wanted to see my son. I didn't expect you to lie to me. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but her voice was still firm, and she did not let herself cry out loud. After a while, Shin Manting said in a clear voice, Moreover, even if I do sell it, what does it have to do with you? Shin Luo and looked at her for a while, his expression unreadable. After a long time, he said, I want to take care of your business. Shin Manting's face suddenly turned pale. She struggled for a moment, but Shin Luo quickly changed the topic. It's good that you're not going to date another man. I originally planned to let you see the child, but if my son's mother is such a piece of trash, then there's no need to see her. Shin Manting grasped the main point and looked at him with hope. No, I just want to dress up and leave a better impression on my son. Really. Chapter 1998. Shin Luo and looked at her and pulled her. Shin Manting didn't move. She took a step forward after being pulled by him. Shin Luo and turned around and strode forward, pulling her with him. Shin Manting didn't make a sound and followed him silently. They arrived at a restaurant. Shin Manting used to come here often and especially liked the food here. It wasn't a fancy restaurant, but Shin Manting hadn't eaten in such an occasion for a long time. She followed Shin Luo and sat down. The waiter quickly brought the menu and waited for them to order. Shin Luo and ordered a lot of dishes in one breath. She didn't know whether it was a coincidence or not, but she found that she liked many of them. Shin Luo didn't like spicy food, but she liked it very much. At least half of the dishes he ordered were spicy. Her heart fluttered slightly, and a strange feeling surrounded her. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. She had nothing to add. She looked at him and said, I'm going to the bathroom. Okay. Shin Luo took a sip of tea. I'll take you to see our son after dinner. Shin Manting's posture stiffened slightly, and she quickly left. When she walked to the bathroom, she realized that he wasn't afraid that she would run away. Was he? So, when she stood up, she deliberately mentioned their son. She had to admit that this was a very effective method. Not to mention that Shinmanting didn't have any intention of running away. Even if she did, she might give up her original plan because of his words. Shenluo and knew her too well. She went to the bathroom and washed her hands carefully before returning to the dining table. Shenluo and was on the phone. He looked calm and emotionless. Got it. I'm eating. We'll talk when we get back, Shenluo and said lightly. Then, as if he had thought of something, he said, by the way, Manting will go back with us later. You should get ready. Shinmanting was shocked and looked at him. On the other end of the phone, Shenluo and said incredulously, what? She's going to see the baby, and then she'll leave. As he spoke, Shenluo and looked at her as if asking, right? Shinmanting smiled awkwardly and nodded before sitting down. The dishes were quickly served, and Shenluo and hung up the phone. No one spoke first. They ate quietly from the beginning to the end. Shinmanting, on the other hand, felt at ease. She didn't stand on ceremony and ate a lot. Shenluo unpaid the bill and quickly led her home. Looking at the familiar villa, Shinmanting found it difficult to move forward. Although this was not the place where she grew up, she had lived here for several years. In those years, there were laughter and pain. Except for Shenluo and the people inside were all very nice to her. Shinmanting always felt that she owed him. Now that he had set foot on this piece of land again, he felt very complicated. Shenluo and had already pressed the doorbell. He looked back at Shinmanting, who was a few meters away, and said coldly, why aren't you coming over? You want me to invite you? Shinmanting moved her lips as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She could only give up. He walked forward, and soon the door opened. When Nanny saw Shenluo in, she said, you're finally back, baby, but before he could finish a sentence, he caught a glimpse of another figure behind Shenluo in. Chapter 1999. Shinmanting smiled awkwardly and said, Nanny, he. It was a familiar voice. Nanny, he looked at Shinmanting for a while and said, Miss, come in. Miss, these two words were really ironic. Shinmanting didn't know how she felt at the moment. She pursed her lips and followed Shenluo and inside. Aunt Zhang was holding the baby and coaxing him. She was surprised to see Nanny, he come in with a strange woman behind the young master. She asked casually, who is this? The baby's mother. Shenluo N's voice was low and unfriendly. Nanny Zhang's eyelids twitched, and she couldn't help but look at Shinmanting. Didn't they say that the baby's mother was dead? How had such a big living person die just like that? But she didn't dare to ask and could only nod. Shenluo and stepped forward and took the baby. The baby had obviously been crying. His big black eyes were wet, and his long eyelashes were stuck in his eyes. Shenluo and saw him and reached out to pull him out. Shinmanting couldn't help but step forward and say, he's so big. That's right, Shenluo and replied. He glanced at her indifferently. If you're any more heartless, he'll grow bigger by the time you come again. His voice was calm, but it made Shinmanting's face burn. Nanny, he, and the other servant were looking at her. This man didn't give her any face at all. Shinmanting silently carried the baby over. Her cheeks were a little red. She looked down and saw the baby's white and tender face. He was growing well. He was at least 2 or 3 times heavier than he was 2 months ago. He didn't look like a 3-month-old baby. She would believe it even if someone told her that he was 4 or 5 months old. She caressed the baby's little face lovingly, and the corners of her lips curled into a smile. Sit down. Don't you feel tired standing? Shenluo and sat down on the sofa and said, Aunt Zhang, bring a bottle of milk. Yes, Aunt Zhang answered and hurriedly went to bring Nanny he with her. What's going on? Aunt Zhang asked. Nanny he glanced at him and said in a low voice, just do what you need to do. It's none of our business to ask about the boss's business. Anyway, that woman is the baby's mother. Biological. You can adopt him? Then why did eldest young master say that she died? This person is still alive and well. She looks quite strong and very good looking. Nanny he glanced at the living room and said, Sigh, I don't know how to put it. Anyway, it's quite complicated. Make your milk. I'll go make some tea. Aunt Zhang saw that she was so stubborn that she couldn't open her mouth no matter how hard she tried. Unwilling to give up, she turned her head and muttered, If you ask me, it must be a couple quarreling. Young master is also like that. Who can stand it? Do what you need to do. Nanny he did not know what to do with her. She made some tea and went out. Shun Luo and Shun Manting sat on the sofa, facing each other. Shun Manting held the baby in her arms and smiled. The baby seemed to recognize her. He was grinning, revealing his pink and tender gums. His little mouth was full of saliva and almost dripped out. When Nanny he saw this, she muttered to herself, "She's indeed a biological mother." She doesn't even smile so happily when they've been hugging and coaxing her for a long time. Chapter 2000. Thank you, Shun Manting said. Nanny he smiled, then glanced at them, put down the teacup, and left. Aunt Zhang brought the milk powder over and said, "Young master, it's ready. Give it to her." Shun Luo and pointed at Shun Manting. Shun Manting glanced at it and reached out to take it. She tested the temperature and frowned, saying, "It's so hot." Aunt Zhang was a little dissatisfied when she heard that, but she still said, "I was thinking that he might not be hungry so soon. He might drink it after a while, so I heated it up a little." Shun Manting didn't say anything and put the bottle on the coffee table in front of her. Aunt Zhang glanced at her and saw that she didn't say anything, so she turned and left. But after a while, the baby stretched out his hands and looked like he was about to cry. Shun Manting saw that the baby must be hungry. She touched the bottle and found that the temperature was still a little high. She tested it and frowned, saying, "Lower the temperature. It's too hot. How can the baby eat it?" Aunt Zhang came over and said, "Then I'll add some cold water." "What?" Shun Manting thought she heard wrong. "What did you say?" Aunt Zhang was confused. She didn't think there was anything wrong and said, "Cold water. Where did you hire this aunt? Is she a child caretaker? How dare you add cold water to the baby's milk?" Shun Manting laughed as if she had heard a joke. "Hold it. I'll do it." Aunt Zhang was a little angry and said, "What's wrong with adding cold water? He's still drinking it. The baby is still so young. What if he gets sick from adding cold water to his milk? How can you take responsibility?" Shun Manting handed the baby to Shun Luo and said angrily, "He's not your child. How can you be so careless?" Aunt Zhang was also unconvinced and shouted, "Do you really have to be like this? Do you really think you're a mistress?" The baby seemed to be frightened and began to cry. Shun Manting didn't expect to be criticized like this. She looked at Nanny He, who had heard the noise, and rushed over. She asked, "Nanny He, who is she?" Nanny He was still working and wiped her apron twice. She smiled awkwardly and said, "A new aunt. She's been here for less than half a month. Go back. There's no need to come back." Shun Luo stood up with the baby in his arms. His expression was grim. "You don't have any common sense at all. How can you take care of a child like this?" Auntie Zhang was flustered and exasperated. "Fine, I won't do it. My 3 children were raised like this. Why are rich people so squeamish?" "Nanny He," Shun Luo called out. Nanny He quickly nodded and pulled Aunt Zhang along. "Let's go. Who would add raw water to such a young child's milk?" "Who said I'm adding raw water? I'm talking about cold-boiled water." Aunt Zhang finally understood. She turned around and said, "Young master, I'm talking about cold-boiled water. You can drink it after mixing it evenly." Shun Manting had already entered the kitchen with the milk bottle. Shun Luo glanced at her and said, "You don't have to come again. Let's go." Nanny He tugged at her. "What kind of nanny has such a bad temper? Just based on what you said just now, you can't stay." Aunt Zhang felt wronged. "I didn't say anything. Young mistress," Nanny He said in a low voice. "Who are you to decide who will be the young mistress?" Aunt Zhang was speechless for a moment. Indeed, what she said was a little inappropriate. Chapter 2001. Aunt Zhang was puzzled. She looked at Shun Luo, but didn't say anything. She turned around and left. Shun Luo held the baby in his arms. The baby's face was red from crying. He waved his hands, and his voice sounded childish and heart-wrenching. Shun Manting soaked the bottle in cold water and waited for it to cool down before she came out. She walked quickly, and her heart was in her throat. She rushed forward and stuffed the bottle into the baby's mouth. As soon as the baby's mouth was blocked, he stopped crying. She hugged the milk bottle and sucked hard, drinking a little too quickly. Shenmanting looked at the baby, and her face softened. She looked up at Shenluo and then asked, "Do you want a hug?" Shenluo and handed it over. Shenmanting took it and held the bottle in her hand. Her heart softened. "Where do you live now?" Shenluo and looked at the baby and asked abruptly. Shenmanting looked up and found that he wasn't looking at her. She asked weakly, "You're asking me? Who else would I ask if not you?" Shenluo and looked away and stood up. "Tongzhou, so far away?" Shenluo and looked at her and then at the baby. "You made me fire the nanny I hired to take care of the baby. What should I do now? You let this kind of nanny take care of the baby?" Shenmanting found it ridiculous. "Are you crazy? I had no choice. It's not long after the new year. Few nannies of her age are willing to be nannies. It's not suitable to find a young one." Shenluo and put his hands in his pockets. "Now that the nanny is gone, you have to compensate me." Shenmanting was annoyed and retorted, "How can you be so unreasonable? You were the one who fired him, not me. I wouldn't have fired her if you hadn't pointed out her small problem. You call this a small problem?" Shenmanting was angry. "Isn't the baby your own? She wanted to add cold water to your son's milk. What if the baby got a stomachache? Is this a small problem?" Shenluo and glanced at her. "I don't know if she used to do this, but the baby has always been fine." Shenmanting was exasperated. "Are you my real father? It was a mistake for me to give the baby to you." His voice was a little loud, and the baby seemed to be frightened as it whimpered. Shenmanting looked down and saw that the baby's eyebrows were red and wrinkled. He looked like he was about to cry. She quickly patted his little body and softly said, don't cry. Mommy was wrong." The baby reached out and carelessly touched her cheek. Shenmanting's heart warmed, but she didn't forget to glare at him. "Aunt Zhang has left. There's no one at home to take care of the child. You should take care of him." Shenluo and looked at her. "You're his biological mother. You'll definitely be better at taking care of him than anyone else." Shenmanting was stunned. She couldn't figure out what he was trying to do. When she didn't respond, he continued, "Think about it." "No." Shenmanting subconsciously refused. But looking at the baby in her arms, she couldn't say anything else. "Where's Mother He? Where is Auntie Wu?" Auntie Wu went back to her hometown before the Lunar New Year. She won't be coming anymore. Nanny He has to do the housework. She has to handle everything in the house. That's why I hired Nanny. I didn't expect her to have such a bad temper." Shenmanting looked at the infant. Chapter 2002. This way, it will show that it has been updated, but in fact, it will replace the previous chapters. You can click on the chapters that you have already read, and there will be no charge. Everyone, this announcement has already been made once. I don't know why you didn't see it, but I will make it again here. Chapter 2003. The baby's pink lips were still dripping with milk. It looked soft and adorable, and Shenmanting's heart was about to melt. Fortunately, she was fired. Otherwise, the baby wouldn't even know it when he was abused. Shenluo's expression was calm as he sat down. "If you don't want to, I'll hire another nanny, but I don't know if she'll treat the baby like Aunt Zhang." Wasn't this clear enough? He wanted Shenmanting to stay, but why didn't he say it out loud? Nanny He was anxious when she heard this, but she was too embarrassed to interrupt the couple's conversation. Shenmanting held the baby in her arms and fell silent. "Stay and take good care of the baby." Yes, how could a nanny take care of the baby be better than a biological mother? Shenmanting was a little tempted. The baby squinted and was a little drowsy. His face was a little pink, and his skin was delicate. What if he was abused by another nanny? "It won't happen," Shenmanting suddenly said in a firm voice. She didn't know if she was trying to convince Shenluo or herself. With Nanny He here, how could there be a nanny who would abuse the baby? "It won't happen. Besides, your mother doesn't go to the hospital often. She'll help take care of the baby, right?" The whole family was here, and it was impossible for all of them to go out, right? "Isn't Julia married? You can ask his wife to help." "That's Julia's wife, not mine. Why should she help me take care of the baby?" Shen Luo and frowned and said, "Since you're so unwilling, forget it. You can go back." Shen Luo and stood up as he spoke and reached out to take the baby away. Shen Manting resisted. She held the baby in her arms and took a step back, unwilling to let go. Shen Luo An's expression darkened, and he asked, "What do you mean?" Shen Manting said sheepishly, "The baby is almost asleep. Wait a moment. What are you waiting for? Don't think that you can pretend that you love the baby just because you're holding him." Shen Luo An's expression was calm, but his tone was sarcastic. "It's a fact that you don't want him. Do you think you can pretend that you didn't do anything wrong by pretending?" As he spoke, he pushed her hand away and took the baby in his arms. The baby was about to fall asleep, but was woken up by Shen Luo An's hug. She pouted and blushed, ready to cry. Shen Manting felt a pang in her heart as she watched. But soon, he turned around and quickly said, "I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me see him." After that, he picked up his bag from the sofa and walked out quickly. Nanny, he felt a pang in her heart when she saw Shen Manting's expression. After a while, she turned to look at Shen Luo and said, "How can you say that? It's not easy for Miss to come back. What will happen if you let her hold the baby more?" Shen Luo An's face remained expressionless when he heard this. He said, "Some people have to be kept in suspense. When she's done humiliating herself, she'll naturally change her mind." Then, she carried the baby back to the room. Nanny, he stomped her feet angrily and heartbrokenly. What a jerk. Who would want to stay after saying that? Fortunately, it wasn't her son, otherwise she would have strangled him to death. Chapter 2004. When Shen Manting came out of the Shun family, she couldn't hold back her tears. Every word that Shen Luo and had said seemed to stab into her heart. Yes, she was the one who didn't want the child. In order to leave Shen Luo, and she even gave up the child. It was also proved that Shen Luo and took good care of the child. He was fair and chubby. If she had raised him by her side, he wouldn't have become like this. She had to survive, and she had to live. Therefore, she had to work, she had to earn money, and she had to support herself first. When Shen Luo and asked her to stay and take care of the baby, Shen Manting was tempted. But it seemed that she was used to it, and she immediately refused. In the past, she would have convinced herself that she was afraid of Shen Luo An's violence. But after spending time with Shen Luo and during the confinement period, and after seeing him later, Shen Manting's mood had obviously eased a lot. When she saw Shen Luo in, it was no longer because she was afraid. It was because Shen Manting couldn't tell why. It seemed that avoiding Shen Luo and refusing him had become a habit. Realizing this, Shen Manting suddenly laughed at herself. What a terrible habit. It was so terrible that she even lost the child. When she returned to the small rented house in Tongzhou, the room was very dark. Shen Manting didn't turn on the light. Instead, she walked to the mirror and looked at herself in the bright and beautiful mirror. Suddenly, Shen Manting was not used to it. She looked so beautiful. She was so beautiful that she didn't look like Shen Manting. Ding dong. It was a WeChat notification. She looked down and took out her phone from her bag. It was from Sisai, who had recruited her last time. Sisai. Hello. Have you arrived in the capital? Mopi, yes, I'm in Tongzhou. Sisai. Okay, then please come to XX District XX Road North number 89 for an interview tomorrow morning. Mopi Heart. Okay. Yi Qianqian saw Shan Julia's message and was very nervous. She said, "Is it really okay for us to lie to people like this? I think Shen Manting is very pitiful. What if she finds out that it's all a scam? Will she go crazy?" Shan Julia stuffed the phone back to her and said carelessly, "Maybe, but I really asked her to come for an interview." Bah, you said it's a job in the book marketing department. What are you talking about? Besides, it's not just the job that's different. The salary and benefits are different too. If she finds out that we're the ones who lied to her, won't she be even angrier? Don't worry. I've already taken care of the salary. It's just that the job is a little tough. I'm not sure if Sister Manton can handle it. How hard? I leave early and return late. How early and how late? If she lives in Tongzhou, she might have to leave an hour and a half earlier to catch the subway to get here. F***ck me. Are you crazy? Yi Qianqian found it hard to believe. Didn't you say that there would be a staff dormitory? Didn't we agree on that before? Yeah, so I rented a dormitory for Yang Ye's female employees. They probably moved in already. That's good. Yi Qianqian breathed a sigh of relief. The interview went very smoothly. Although Shen Manting had some doubts about the position, the salary and benefits were similar to what was stated in the WeChat message, so she didn't ask any more questions. After moving from Tongzhou, Shen Manting only had a large backpack with her. The probation period was only 3 days. During those 3 days, Shen Manting ran up and down. She was really exhausted, but she felt a sense of fulfillment. However, on the 4th day, when she officially started work, she received bad news. Chapter 2005. Shen Manting clocked in at the office, changed into her work uniform, and was about to start work when she received a call. There was no name on the number, but it was very familiar. It was Shen Luoan. Shen Manting hung up the phone and started to prepare her tools. He had all the banknotes and a series of preparations to make. About 3 minutes after he finished, his phone rang again. However, it wasn't Shen Luoan this time. It was a landline number. Territory, Imperial Capital. It was not the Shun family's landline number. Shen Manting pondered for a moment before answering the call. Hello. It was the voice of a middle-aged woman. It sounded a little noisy. Hello. This is Imperial Capital Rinxin Hospital. I'm the head nurse of the pediatrics department. Shen Yuexiao has a high fever that hasn't subsided. It's been half a day, and his fever has reached 39 degrees Celsius. Shen Yuexiao? What? Shen Manting couldn't react for a moment. After a while, she suddenly remembered that wasn't the baby's name. Hurry up and come back to take care of the child. Don't quarrel with the child's father. The child has a high fever. The head nurse's voice was full of reproach and impatience. Call you man. No one could take care of him better than his own mother. Shen Manting's mind was buzzing, and the head nurse hung up the phone. She hurriedly called Shen Luoan, and the call was quickly picked up. The voice sounded a little hoarse. Hello, Shen Luoan. I heard that the child is sick. Shen Manting's voice was filled with panic. As she spoke, she had already walked to her wardrobe. The other side responded in a low voice. When Shen Manting heard this, she became even angrier and yelled, Is this how you take care of the child? You're such a good father to have a fever like that. He didn't bother to hide his voice at all. His colleagues looked over. What are you doing? At least I can take care of the child. Where have you been? Shen Luoan retorted sarcastically. The baby is on a 4-drip now. He's had a fever since last night. If the fever continues, he'll become retarded. Shen Manting's heart was pounding, and her mind was in a mess. He hung up the phone and hurriedly took out his clothes to change before he went to the leader to ask for leave. Fortunately, the leader was still reasonable. When they heard that the child was sick, they didn't say anything and just let him go. This place was a little far from Benevolent Heart Hospital, and it was rush hour. This was the bad thing about the Imperial Capital. No matter what mode of transportation, there would always be terrible traffic jams. There was a traffic jam on the highway and a traffic jam on the subway. Fortunately, Shen Manting squeezed through the crowd and waited for the subway 3 times before she finally got on the train. There were fewer people at the Rinxin subway station. Shen Manting walked quickly and soon left the road. Shen Manting was panting heavily when she found the place Shen Luo and had mentioned. The child was asleep and his body was red from the fever. Shen Manting reached out and touched it. It was shockingly hot. Heavens! Tears welled up in Shen Manting's eyes. Why did he suddenly have such a high fever? What kind of nanny did you hire for him? Shen Luo and was already in a terrible fix. When he heard this, he closed his eyes and scratched his head. Shen Manting was exasperated. She kicked him and said, Are you mute? Say something. I've already said that a nanny can't take care of him as well as a real mother. Half of the credit goes to you for the baby's current state. Shen Luo frowned impatiently. How dare you blame me? Chapter 2006. Her voice was choked with sobs, but she didn't forget to glare at Shen Luo as she spoke. Shen Luo and looked at her tears and sighed heavily. He said helplessly, "Why are you crying? You're cooling down now." Shen Manting went up to take a look. There was a baby patch on the baby's forehead, and he was still receiving in foredrip. Shen Manting's heart ached when her little feet were tied up. "Can you lower his temperature?" She looked at Shen Luo and with a hopeful expression. "No, the temperature is too high." Shen Luo sighed. "I didn't go home the day before yesterday. I left the baby with Nanny He." Would Nanny He be so careless with her children? Shen Manting frowned and wiped away her tears. "And where did you go? Why didn't you come home?" Shen Luo furrowed his brows and looked at Shen Manting. He seemed to have calmed down a little and said, "Shen Manting, I have a job too. I have things to do too. You said that the nanny is unreliable, so I didn't hire a nanny. I left the baby with Nanny He. Mom was at home the day before yesterday, but she went out." Shen Manting stopped talking. She wanted to hold the infant, but she was afraid that she might accidentally touch him and make him uncomfortable. The nurse walked in and saw Shen Manting. She said, "You must be the baby's mother. Come, keep an eye on him. When he wakes up later, remember to feed him some medicine to reduce his fever." The nurse was holding a small packet of granules in her hand. It was the first time Shen Manting had seen such a thing. She nodded repeatedly. "Give him the medicine after he drinks the milk. It will take a while." "All right." Shen Manting turned to look at Shen Luo. "Did you bring milk powder?" "Yes." Shen Luo pointed to another place. There was not only milk powder, but also paper diapers and a kettle for boiling water. There was also a large bottle of mineral water next to it. It was obvious that it was brought from home. It was obvious that the milk powder had already been washed once. Shen Manting went over to boil the water and left it there for a long time before the milk was added. The baby woke up with a whimper. Shen Luo looked at the foredrip that was about to run out. As she coaxed the child, she pressed the call button. The nurse pulled out the needle and frowned. "It's still hot. As parents, you have to pay more attention. It's bad for such a young child to catch a cold." Shen Manting and Shen Luo remained silent. Shen Luo picked up the baby and sat on the bed. Shen Manting held the bottle and said, "The temperature is fine. Let the baby drink it." However, when she stuffed the pacifier into the baby's mouth, the baby refused to drink. She twisted her head, her face flushed red, and she didn't even open her eyes. Shen Manting's heart ached even more. She reached out and took it. Shen Luo stood up and said, "The baby hasn't had milk for a long time. He used to drink once every hour or so. Now it's been 3 hours. Shen Manting became even more anxious when she heard that. "What should we do? Force it down?" Shen Luo looked at him. "He might feel better after taking some medicine." Shen Manting frowned, but she still adopted Shen Luo's method. The two of them tossed and turned for a while. Although the baby didn't eat much, he still ate. Shen Luo fed the baby some medicine. After crying for a while, the baby fell asleep. Shen Manting couldn't stop hugging him. Her heart ached, and she blamed herself. From time to time, Shen Luo would also reach out to touch it. Fortunately, his fever had finally subsided. Shen Luo used an ear thermometer on the baby. The temperature was only 37.5 degrees. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. When Shen Manting saw that, she was finally relieved. Chapter 2007. Whatever. Shen Luo glanced at her. "It's not for sale outside. You know my taste. Just buy whatever you like." "How about noodles?" Shen Luo asked casually. "I want to eat. Didn't you say anything?" Shen Manting glared at him and said, "Whatever you want, then." Shen Luo, who had been suppressing his emotions for a long time, suddenly felt a lot better. He quickly walked out, and when he came back, he was already carrying 2 bags. However, there were 2 more people in the room. Shun Jilia and Yi Qianqian were inside. Yi Qianqian was sitting on the bed, while Shun Jilia was fussing about changing diapers. When Shun Jishua saw Shen Luo, he said, "Hey, you bought so many things. Did you know we were coming?" When Yi Qianqian saw that, she nudged Shun Jilia and said, "Since Big Brother is back, let's go. The baby's fever has subsided." We have to tell Mommy the good news. What's the hurry? Shun Juliet pulled a diaper over. Big brother is finally back. Let's sit down and have a chat. What are you talking about? Yi Chanqian glared at him. Are you trying to starve me to death? Let's go eat first. His eyes were filled with warning. Shun Juliet was at a loss for words. He said, all right, my wife has the final say. Come on, let's go eat. The young couple finally left. As soon as Yi Chanqian stepped out of the room, she smacked Shun Juliet and said, are you silly? Big brother and sister-in-law have finally gotten together. Why don't you just leave them alone and eat together? Who knows, they might even rekindle their old feelings and rekindle their love. When Shun Juliet heard that, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. What did you say? Love what fire? Have they ever been together? Go away, what do you know? Yi Chanqian took his hand and analyzed. If a woman doesn't love that man, it's impossible for her to give birth to his child. Look, she's so nervous about the child. This shows that the child is very important to her. That's why she's so concerned about it. Besides, if she really hated Big Brother, she wouldn't have come back to the capital. That's right. Yeah. Shun Juliet's eyes turned into crescents. Yes, my wife is right. Yi Chanqian glared at him. You don't believe me? Yes. Then why are you laughing? I laughed. I didn't expect you to be so smart. Yi Chanqian was annoyed and elbowed him. Go to hell. You're laughing at me. Shun Juliet chuckled as he blocked the attack and quickly apologized. In the ward, Shun Luo spread out the lunchboxes he had just bought and asked casually, what did they say to you? No, I just asked about the baby. Shun Luo opened the lunchbox and put down the small table on the bed. Let's eat. The baby has never been sick before. No. Shun Luo didn't even raise his head. I've been taking care of it all by myself. I rarely touch it. A few days ago, I couldn't leave the laboratory. So weak. Enrich felt that it was too much of a coincidence. She looked at the baby in her arms and felt his body temperature. She was still in shock. Shun Luo, are you busy in the lab? I'm busy. Shun Luo didn't even raise his head. I've already rested for too long this year. I'm especially busy at this time of the year. You know that. She knew. How could she not know? Chapter 2008. Shun Luo had already set up the lunchbox. When he heard this, he paused and looked up at her. Enrich looked conflicted and said, the baby is still young. I want to take care of him for a while and let him live with me for a while. Is that okay? She was asking for his opinion. Shun Luo had already guessed it in his heart. With a self-deprecating smile, Shun Luo sat down and handed her a bowl of rice. Of course. Why not? Enrich's eyes lit up and she asked, really? Yes, but he must be taken care of at home. The child can't go anywhere. Shun Luo looked at her. When I first brought him from Jiangsu, he was not acclimatized. I won't take him far away. I'll stay in the capital. Enrich looked at him. I have a job in the capital. I can afford to raise him. It was a monthly salary of 5,000 yuan, and accommodation was included. If she ate sparingly, it would be enough to raise the child. Shun Luo had a mocking smile on his face. What kind of job? How can you take care of the child at the same time? His smile was a little malicious. Enrich saw it and was angry. She said angrily, what do you mean? What do I mean? Why are you so sensitive? Shun Luo looked away and said. Enrich was even more angry. Can't you speak properly? Didn't I speak properly? Shun Luo glanced at her. I didn't yell at you or scold you. Why can you speak properly? Enrich was speechless for a moment. Looking at him, eating slowly, her stomach was also growling. Eat. Don't say that I mistreated you. Shun Luo put a pair of chopsticks on the lunchbox. Let's talk after eating. Enrich felt very uncomfortable. Looking at Shun Luo's calm appearance, she felt even more angry. She carefully put the baby down, wiped her hands, removed the chopsticks, and began to eat happily. No matter what, she couldn't make things difficult for herself. After eating, Enrich consciously cleaned up and threw the food into the trash can. Shun Luo wiped the corner of his mouth and said slowly, move in. Aunt Zhang just left, so there's a nanny room. You want me to be a nanny? Enrich couldn't believe it. She was the baby's biological mother. Could it be that she needed to be paid to be a nanny to take care of her own child? How ironic. What else do you want to be? Shenluo and looked at her and sneered. Young madam? Or a wet nurse? Shen Manting stopped talking and felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. He felt terrible. It was unbearable. You've been trying to distance yourself from me and the baby. Wouldn't it be too unfair for you to marry me? Shenluo and stood up and wiped his hands with a wet tissue. So, I have no choice but to make you a nanny. I'm giving you a chance. You can take care of the baby, and I can rest assured. I won't treat you shabbily in terms of salary. He casually tossed the wet tissue away, and with an unknown expression, he said softly, You know, I've always been very generous to you. He didn't say anything harsh, but every word seemed to stab at her heart. Shen Manting felt a lump in her throat, and tears welled up in her eyes. She swallowed hard and leaned over to check on the baby's tiny body. It was much better than before. However, the scorching heat from before was still lingering in his hand. Chapter 2009. Okay. Shen Manting's voice was soft. Shenluo and looked at her and seemed a little surprised. I promise you. Shen Manting looked at the baby, and her voice was so soft that no one knew where it came from. As soon as she agreed, Shen Manting went to resign. She apologized to her supervisor and boss and went to the Shun family that day. Shen Manting didn't have much luggage. She only had a small suitcase and a small backpack with her toiletries and other things that she couldn't bear to throw away. Shen Manting was a little hesitant when she arrived, but after thinking about it, she still rang the doorbell. Nanny He quickly opened the door and saw Shen Manting carrying the luggage. She was stunned and said, Miss? Shen Manting smiled awkwardly. Nanny He immediately reacted and said, Come in quickly. Here, give it to me. She reached out to take the suitcase from Shen Manting. Shen Manting quickly said, No, I can do it myself. Nanny He, where's the room of the aunt who left last time? I'll move in. Huh? Nanny He was stunned again. That's the nanny's room. Yes, it's the nanny's room. Shen Manting's face was a little hot, and she said, From now on, I'll be the nanny of the family. Nanny He felt ridiculous and laughed. But when she looked at Shen Manting, she realized that she didn't seem to be joking. For a moment, the two of them froze. Their expressions were indescribably awkward. Just then, the door of the room opened and the baby's voice was heard. Shenluo and walked out with the baby in his arms and glanced at it. He said, Nanny He, take her to Aunt Zhang's room and help her tidy up. From now on, she'll come to our house to take care of the baby. When Nanny He heard Shenluo Anne's words, she still couldn't believe it and said, Young master, do you know what you're talking about? She's Miss Manting. Go. Shenluo and glanced at it, and then his eyes fell on Shen Manting. I'm going out later. I need to go to the laboratory. You take care of the baby. When Shen Manting heard that, she was angry and said, Do you have any conscience? The baby is so feverish, and you're still in the mood to work. Shenluo and sneered and said, Since you're here to be a nanny, you should act like one. What kind of standpoint are you using to talk to me? Have you forgotten how I fired Aunt Zhang? Shen Manting paused for a moment, then gritted her teeth and said, I'm the mother of the child. If the child's mother wasn't here, I wouldn't have been able to leave. Shenluo and glanced at her and then turned around. Shen Manting was stunned. Hurry up. I'm in a hurry, Shenluo urged. Shen Manting pulled her luggage into the room. However, the moment she entered, she felt that it was a little unbearable. This is the nanny's room? The room was small and dark. Next to the washing machine, behind the balcony. The rectangular room looked like a corridor, but both sides were blocked, so it looked like a small room. There was only one bed at one end. The bed was 2 meters long, and there was a bedside table. At the other end was a bathroom. It was very small. There was a toilet and a shower, but it didn't even have a sink. This really livable. Chapter 2010. Nanny He saw her expression and said, This is the smallest nanny's room. It's a small cubicle. Why don't you stay in my room when I'm free? Shen Manting shook her head and said, That's it. I'll be a nanny in the future. There's no difference in treatment. She said, Miss, young master is probably just joking with you. It's not like you don't know him. He has a nasty mouth, but he might not be thinking the same way. You should go and apologize to him. You can still take care of the baby. You don't have to stay here anymore. Then where should I live? Shenmanting laughed self-deprecatingly. I'm not the daughter here, nor am I Shenluo and sister. It's most suitable for me to live here. As she spoke, she put down her suitcase and said, I'll go take the baby first. I'll clean up later. Nanny, you go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Shenmanting placed her handbag on the bed and walked out of the room. Shenluo and had coaxed the baby to sleep. He put him in the crib. When he saw her come in, he said, If anything happens to the baby later, call me immediately. Nonsense, Shenmanting frowned. He'll be fine. Shenluo propped himself up and took off his clothes. Shenmanting was shocked and asked, What are you doing? Shenluo paused and glanced at her. With a natural expression, he said, I'm changing. He casually threw the clothes into the basket and slowly opened the wardrobe. He took out a piece of clothing and slowly put it on before turning to leave. Shenmanting felt a little uncomfortable. After he left, she dared to turn around and look. Shenluo's room was very big. It was also a master bedroom. There was a large cloakroom and a 2-meter bed. The bathroom in the suite was fully equipped. It was divided into a toilet, a shower, and a bathtub. It was huge. This room alone was bigger than all the houses she had lived in for more than a year. However, when she saw the bed, Shenmanting still couldn't calm down and felt a little scared. Back then, Shenluo had pressed her on this bed and forced her to do all the things she didn't want. She had been humiliated in all kinds of positions, and he had treated her as a lowly prostitute. Shenmanting's heart tightened, and she suddenly felt that she was extremely cheap. She looked at the baby who was sleeping peacefully in the crib and felt her heart ache. So be it. It seemed that it was too late to turn back now. He walked out and walked his old room. The room was still empty and tidied up very cleanly. From the looks of it, it should have been converted into a guest room. There were quite a number of rooms in the villa. The door to Juliet's room was tightly shut, as was the door to the room next to it. Nanny came forward and noticed her gaze. She said, These 2 rooms are second young master's. The room he used to live in was too small. Now that he's married, he's using a bigger room. The couple is buying an apartment. The renovations are already done. They'll probably move out at the end of the year. Shenmanting nodded and sighed. Juliet has grown up. Yes. Nanny smiled. Everyone in the family is getting happier and happier. All that's left is young master. Shenmanting fell silent and looked at her. Chapter 2011. Nanny sighed faintly and said, During that period of time, eldest young master was really in a bad state. He rarely went to work and rarely spoke. Sometimes he didn't even eat and would sit in his room for most of the day. Shenmanting stopped talking and turned to look at the baby. The baby was sleeping soundly. Although his facial features were still immature, his nose and mouth were identical to Shenluo's. Miss, I'll leave first. Sir, and Madam will be back soon, Nanny said. Shenmanting nodded and began to tidy up the baby's belongings. Sure enough, Shenlongyue and Mrs. Shun returned after a while. As soon as she returned, she asked Nanny about the child's whereabouts. Mrs. Shun walked into Shenluo's room with a distressed expression. When she saw Shenmanting, she was slightly stunned. Shenmanting smiled awkwardly and said, Hello, Mrs. Shun. Long time no see. Only then did Madame Shun regain her senses. She looked at her and turned her head in a daze, shouting, Long Yu, Manting is back. Shenlongyue had just put down his briefcase when he heard this. He immediately walked up to her and was slightly surprised to see her. Then, a look of joy appeared on his calm face as he asked, Manting? Shenmanting nodded awkwardly and smiled. Sir. The smile on Shenlongyue's face froze when he heard this obviously distant form of address. He turned to look at Mrs. Shun and saw that she looked sad. Mrs. Shun stepped forward and looked at Shenmanting. She said, Look at you. You've lost so much weight. Besides, we're your parents. Can you address us as you used to? Shen Manting pursed her lips and remained silent. Shen Longhua sighed and walked to the baby's crib. He reached out to touch the baby's body and said, "It's good that the fever has subsided." Shen Manting looked at them and said, "Go and rest. Leave this to me. From now on, I'll be the baby's nanny." Shen Longhua was shocked. "What did you say? How can you be a nanny?" Mrs. Shen was delighted and said, "Do you mean that you'll take care of the baby and not leave?" In fact, Shen Manting hadn't thought about it yet. When he heard this, he neither nodded nor shook his head. "I'll take care of the baby. As for how long, she didn't know. Perhaps half a year, or a few months. After all, she was not a member of the Shen family. She could not take this child with her. She would not take anything else with her." Mrs. Shen's face lit up with joy. She looked at Shen Manting and said, "That's great. I'll ask Nanny he to prepare more dishes. Our family will be happy today." "Sir, madam, there's no need for that." Shen Manting looked at them and said, "Shen Luo and asked me to be a nanny, so I'm a nanny. I'm nothing but this." The nanny's room has already been tidied up. Mrs. Shen's heart ached. She looked at Shen Manting and stomped her feet anxiously. "How can you do that? Manting, don't say things like that." Shen Longhua was the same. He frowned and shook his head. "You're not allowed to be a nanny. Since you're back, go back to your room." Chapter 2012. Give the child a home? Shen Manting smiled awkwardly and said, "Well, since you're back, look after the child. I'll go pack my things first." As she spoke, she pulled her hand out of Shen Luo An's and quickly walked out. Mrs. Shen was a little stunned when she saw this. She turned to look at Shen Longhua and found that he was rebuking her. "You're too impatient." Mrs. Shen felt aggrieved. She pursed her lips and said, "Isn't that what you mean? That's what I want, but Manting has just come back. It's not too late to express this intention later." Shen Longhua reached out and gently patted his wife on the back. "Luo and has done too many ridiculous things in the past. I'm afraid she won't be able to accept him so soon. Let's take it slow." "Take it slow?" Mrs. Shen felt even more aggrieved. "Luo and is already so old, and they even have a child." As she spoke, she lowered her voice and said, "And now that she's living in our house, what if someone sees her and thinks she's our daughter? Wouldn't she be fooling around with Luo?" The more she thought about this, the more anxious Mrs. Shen became. She looked at Shen Longhua and said, "Honey, I think this matter should be settled as soon as possible. I can take my time, but Luo and is your son and your mother's grandson. It doesn't matter if you're not anxious, but your mother will be." Mrs. Shen's words made sense, and Shen Longhua also thought of this problem. He frowned and said, "Since Luo and said to let her come to our house as a nanny first, he must have made arrangements. Whoever started the trouble must end it. Let's wait for Luo and to settle it himself. Mother will definitely be impatient. I'll think about it for Mother. Isn't she coming back in a few days? We'll talk about it then." Although Mrs. Shen was not very satisfied when she heard this, Shen Luo and Shen Longhua had the same temperament. Since he did this, he must have already planned it out. She hoped that she wouldn't make things worse. The couple discussed it, and Shen Manting had already begun to prepare her small room. Although the room was small, it was still a separate compartment. She put the bed sheets on, turned on the light, and entered a new living environment. During this period of time, she had been in many places. Although it was a little small, the conditions were not bad. The baby seemed to know the time. Shen Manting had just unpacked her luggage when she heard the baby crying. He quickly washed his hands and hurried over. Mrs. Shen was already coaxing the baby in her arms. When she saw Shen Manting approaching, she smiled and said, "Manting, can you help change the baby's diaper? He might have pooped." "Yeah." She then looked at the time and said, "It's time for the baby to take his medicine. We have to feed him some milk first." Mrs. Shen was even happier. Although Manting was unwilling to marry Luo, she was, after all, the baby's biological mother. When taking care of the baby, she was more attentive than any other nanny. Take it slow. Longhua was right. This kind of matter could not be rushed. After playing with the child, Nanny he finished preparing the meal. Shen Julia and his wife didn't come back for dinner and Shinluo and couldn't leave the laboratory, so they were the only ones eating. Chapter 2013. She hurriedly finished her meal and hurried into the room. The baby had just taken a medicine and fell asleep again. Shin Manting looked at the baby's sleeping face next to the crib and the corners of her mouth slightly raised. Shin Manting couldn't get enough of his fair and tender face. From time to time, she would touch his little hands, touch his little face, and even his fetal hair was very cute. She didn't know how long she stayed by his side before sitting down. Being a mother was really a very happy thing. If it weren't for Shin Luo, and perhaps her life would be different now. But it was too late. From the moment she agreed to come back with the old lady, she was destined to be extraordinary in this life. When she looked at the baby, he had already slept for more than an hour. Normally, he should wake up soon. She immediately went to boil water to make the milk powder. Just as the milk powder was ready, the baby woke up with a whimper. Shin Manting looked at it and breathed a sigh of relief. She tested the temperature, and when it was suitable, she put it aside and picked up the baby. She fed the bottle to him, and in a moment the baby stopped crying. A pair of soft and tender hands held the bottle and sucked. Looking at the baby sucking the milk in big mouthfuls, Shin Manting felt a twinge in her heart. When she just left, her breasts were swollen and painful. Every day, she fantasized about the baby sucking in her arms. She fantasized about this feeling for more than half a month. Later, with the little savings she had left, she traveled while doing odd jobs, and the feeling faded a little. However, in the end, under the solicitation of the personnel department, she couldn't help but join. After that, Shin Manting's heart became more and more guilty. When the baby was full, he opened a pair of round black eyes and looked at Shin Manting. A pair of pink and tender feet looked at Shin Manting and stretched out his little fist. She didn't know what he saw, but he suddenly grinned. His pink and tender gums were exposed, and he was so cute that Shin Manting's heart melted. After playing with the baby for a while and changing the baby's diaper, Shin Manting was very sleepy. She looked at the time, and it was past 9 o'clock in the evening. Time passed unknowingly, and Shin Luo and still hadn't returned. After thinking about it, Shin Manting sat on the bed with the baby in her arms. An adult and a child stared at each other. Shin Manting felt like a fool, but she was enjoying it. All of a sudden, the door opened. Shin Manting was startled by the sudden movement. She stood up abruptly. Such an action also startled the baby. He opened his mouth and looked like he was about to cry. When Shin Luo and saw Shin Manting acting as if she was about to face a formidable enemy, he felt as if a certain part of his heart had been ruthlessly stabbed. However, his expression was still gloomy as he asked, "How is the baby?" "Very good." Shin Manting tried to calm herself down. She lowered her head and said, "Very good." "Okay," Shin Luo and answered and was about to close the door. However, this movement soon stopped. He glanced at Shin Manting and decided not to close the door. "I'll take a shower first," he said. "Oh." Shin Manting couldn't help but feel a little anxious as she held the baby in her arms. It was another chance to be alone, and it was in his room. It was as if he had returned to a year ago, before everything had happened. "Wait," Shin Manting suddenly said, "I'll take the baby to the living room first. I'll come out when you're done." Shin Luo felt a stab at his heart, and his lips suddenly tightened. Chapter 2014. The bathroom door was slammed shut with a dull thud. Shin Manting's heart skipped a beat. She walked out with the infant in her arms and sat on the sofa in the living room. Mrs. Shin was wearing pajamas and was drinking water from a glass in her hand. When she saw Shin Manting, she walked over and sat down in front of her. She glanced at the infant and chuckled. "Are you used to being home?" Shin Manting lowered her head and smiled awkwardly. "I'm fine. We're family. Manting, I really like you. Don't be so reserved at home in the future. You're a good child, and the infant doesn't want you to be too harsh on yourself." Mrs. Shin put down her cup and looked at her. "Everyone welcomes you back. Forget all the unhappiness you had in the past." "Okay," Shin Manting responded in a low voice. Then, She held the infant in her arms and fell silent. Mrs. Shin looked at her dispirited expression and sighed softly. She stood up and said, "It's getting late. Go to bed early. Good night." Mrs. Shun felt a little sad. "Good night." Shin Manting sat on the spot for a while and soon heard the sound of slippers. Shin Luo and walked over and glanced at her. Then he reached out his hand. The infant was taken away. He didn't say a word from beginning to end. His hair was still wet, and his face was cold. It was obvious that he was unhappy. Shin Manting wriggled her lips and wanted to say something. But the moment Shin Luo turned around, she immediately swallowed her words. When she saw Shin Luo and closed the door, she got up and returned to her nanny's room. The nanny's room was very small, very small. Shin Manting looked at it and felt a little emotional. But soon, she was defeated by sleepiness. She yawned and pulled out a set of pajamas. Then, she took a shower and fell asleep. The next day, Shin Manting woke up early in the morning. She hadn't learned much during this period of time, but her biological clock was very accurate. She would be sleepy before 10 p.m. and wake up at 6:30 a.m. After washing up, she went out. Nanny, he was already making breakfast. When she saw Shin Manting coming out, she smiled and greeted her. "Morning. Why didn't you sleep a little longer?" "I'm used to it." Shin Manting stepped forward to wash her hands. "Let me help you. What do you need me to do?" "No need." Nanny, he didn't need her help at all. She glared at her and said, "How many people do we need for breakfast? You could go to young master's room and have a look." "Shin Luoan? He hasn't woken up yet, has he?" Shin Manting frowned slightly. "The baby was crying just now. He's probably coaxing the baby now." "Go and take a look," Nanny, he instructed. "See if there's anything I can help with." "All right." Shin Manting wiped her hands. She soon arrived at Shin Luo's door. After a moment of hesitation, she knocked on the door twice. After a few seconds, the person inside opened the door. Shin Manting looked refreshed, clean, and energetic. And Shin Luo, her hair was messy, and she was wearing pajamas. She looked sleepy. He frowned when he saw Shin Manting, but he quickly turned around and lay back on the bed. However, he didn't say anything. He did not ask her to come in, nor did he ask her to leave. He just left the door open. Shin Manting was a little startled. She quickly walked in and took a look at the baby's crib. The baby's big, round eyes were pitch black, and its tongue was spitting out bubbles. He seemed to see Shin Manting and looked at her. Chapter 2015. Squeak. The baby clenched his little fists and waved them around. Shin Manting couldn't help but smile. "Feed him." Shin Luo, who was under the quilt, suddenly blurted out these two words. Shin Manting heard him and quickly walked out with the baby in her arms. She closed the door while she was at it. Shin Luo buried his face in the quilt. When he heard the sound of the door closing, he subconsciously looked up. Sure enough, it was empty. The baby was gone. The room was unbelievably quiet. However, Shin Luo couldn't fall asleep. Shin Manting fed the baby and took him to the garden for a walk. The morning sun was very gentle, and the baby was exposed to it. He frowned out of habit. She widened her beautiful big black eyes and looked left and right. "Manting, it's time to eat." "Nanny," he shouted. Shin Manting immediately replied, "Okay, wait a moment." As soon as she finished speaking, she heard a man's voice from afar. "Don't let the baby get sunburned." She turned around and saw Shin Luo in dark gray home clothes standing at the door. It was obvious that he didn't have enough sleep. Shin Manting looked at the baby in her arms and seemed to have guessed why he was so sleepy. "He's in good condition. You don't have to feed him the cold medicine. The little guy has a bad temper. Remember to feed him or he will sulk alone." Shin Luo walked forward and said in a low voice. Shin Manting heard this and thought it was a little funny. She said, "The baby is still so young. How can he know so much? You could try if you don't believe me." Shin Luo said to Shin Manting, but his eyes were looking at the baby. "I didn't believe it before." Shin Manting was skeptical, but she looked down and saw that the baby seemed to be thinking of something. He smiled and showed his pink gums. "Let's eat." Shin Luo reached out and took the baby. "I have to go to work later. Look after the baby." Shin Manting felt a little strange. Shin Luo and seemed to be in a good mood today. Why did he tell her so many things? However, after saying this, Shen Luo and went back with the baby. Shen Luo and seemed to be very busy. He left the house after 8 o'clock and was not seen the whole day. Shen Manting played with the baby in the room for a while, and the baby fell asleep. Looking at the time, it was already 10 o'clock at night. Shen Luo and hadn't returned yet. Shen Manting was already exhausted. She sat on the edge of the bed and soon fell into a deep sleep. The next time she woke up was because of the baby. Shen Manting had already woken up before she started crying. However, the lights in the room were obviously turned off, and she was clearly leaning against the wall just now. When did she lie down? Shen Manting was slightly shocked. She turned around and saw the man sleeping beside her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she stood up abruptly. The baby began to cry loudly. Shen Manting immediately stood up and carried the baby in her arms. Shen Luo and turned over, covered his ears with a pillow, and went back to sleep. Shen Manting clearly saw his actions. It was obvious that he had no intention of caring for the baby. Shen Manting was a little annoyed when she realized this. What if she wasn't here? Wouldn't he make the baby cry to death? She coaxed the baby and said softly, "Don't cry, don't cry. Mommy will make milk for you. Be good." As he spoke, he did not forget to look at Shen Luo, but he still had no intention of moving. Chapter 2016. Shen Luo and was so sleepy that he still didn't want to open his eyes. Raising his hand to hold hers, he turned around and asked, "What?" "Look after the baby. I'm going to rest." Shen Manting felt angry. "If I'm not here, will you leave the baby alone?" He was crying so hard just now. "He's starving." Shen Luo and opened his eyes. His sleepy eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of fog. He stared at Shen Manting and said slowly, "Aren't you here?" Shen Manting was speechless for a moment. She pulled her hand back angrily and said, "Will you leave him alone if I'm here?" "You're here." Shen Luo and yawned and looked extremely sleepy. "I've worked all day today. I'm exhausted. Do you want the baby to lose his mother and father?" What he said, Shen Manting said angrily. "How can you say that? Will you be exhausted just looking after the baby?" Sooner or later. Shen Luo uncovered himself with the quilt and said in a muffled voice, "Sleep here and look after the baby. I may not be able to wake him up if he cries." Shen Luo and Shen Manting was angry. "I haven't taken a bath yet." "Then go take a bath and come back later to look after the baby." "No, I'm not sleeping here." "What's wrong with sleeping here? It's not like you can't sleep. Didn't you sleep well just now?" Shen Luo uncovered himself in the quilt. "The baby needs someone to look after him. Why would I ask you to come back if you don't care about anything?" Shen Manting was speechless and couldn't refute for a moment. After a long pause, she said angrily, "How can a nanny sleep in the same room as the master? You're the baby's mother." Shen Luo and quickly turned his back. The baby's mother should share a room with the baby. "Stay here. I'm sleepy. I'm going to sleep first." Shen Manting was exasperated. She looked at his tightly wrapped back and angrily reached out to give him a hard shove. "You're being shameless." Shen Luo and didn't say anything and just lay down and pretended to be dead. After a while, she heard the sound of even breathing. Shen Manting was so angry that she stamped her feet. She stood up and quickly walked out. However, as soon as he stepped out, the baby started to whine in the next second. She deliberately waited at the door for a while to see how Shen Luo would react. In the end, he really fell asleep and did not move at all. The baby cried even louder, and Shen Manting was so angry that her eyes turned red. "This bastard." She stomped forward and picked the baby up. She touched his little but out of habit, only to find that his diaper was a little sticky. After wiping the baby's butt and changing him into a clean diaper, she finally managed to coax him asleep. She then went to take a shower. After taking a shower, he felt refreshed and more energetic. Looking at the time, it was almost 2 o'clock. She went to Shen Luo N's room and turned off the lights. She didn't know when the baby had woken up, but he was staring at something with his eyes wide open. Shen Manting reached out and squeezed his little hand. Her heart was filled with tenderness. The baby yawned. Soon, it couldn't hold on any longer, and its eyes slowly opened smaller and smaller. Seeing that the baby had finally fallen asleep, Shin-Manting was extremely sleepy. She glanced at the king-size bed. The bed was very big. At the moment, Shin-Luo was curled up on the innermost side, his body pressed against the wall. She hesitated for a moment and thought of the past few months in Jiangnan. Didn't he spend the same time like this? They slept in the same bed, and he didn't do anything to her. Chapter 2017. Shin-Manting lay down and closed her eyes. She was so sleepy that she fell asleep as soon as she closed her eyes. During this period, the baby woke up twice. Shin-Manting fed him twice and changed his diaper once. After that, the sky was bright. Shin-Luo seemed to be sleeping soundly, but in the middle of the night, Shin-Manting vaguely felt a strange touch on her body. This feeling was inexplicable, but she woke up several times to see Shin-Luo huddled in the corner. Shin-Manting felt lucky, but she also felt that she was being ridiculous. Shin-Luo might not care about her. For example, she had become much uglier since she came here. Moreover, after giving birth to the baby, her belly began to grow fat. Her body was thin, but her belly was bulging, which was very ugly. The sky was bright, and Shin-Manting got up and stretched her back. The baby was still sleeping, and his little mouth was slightly pouting. He looked especially cute. Shin-Manting's lips curled into a smile as she entered the bathroom. After she was released, she went to her room to wash up. The door was closed, and Shin-Luo quickly put down the quilt. He turned over and hugged the quilt in a good mood. He smiled slightly. Shin-Luo woke up after 9 o'clock in the morning. Shin-Manting didn't know how long she had been holding the baby. Seeing him obviously sleeping soundly, she felt unhappy. Although he had been busy the whole day yesterday, he should have had a good rest. But his behavior of completely ignoring the baby made her very angry. After washing up and eating breakfast, Shin-Luo went to change his clothes. He said, "Change your clothes and go buy something for the baby." Shin-Manting was stunned. "You don't have to work today?" "Yes, I finished my project, so I could take a day off." Shin-Luo took the baby and urged, "Go quickly. It's rare that I have time today. The baby is missing a lot of things. Take this opportunity to make up for them." "Missing? What is it missing?" Shin-Manting couldn't think of anything. It seemed that he had everything he needed. Shin-Luo didn't look at her anymore. He was holding the baby in a very good mood, and he laughed. Like a big fool. Shin-Manting felt a little disdainful, and then went back to the room to change. The clothes were very simple. She bought them last summer. They were a little big, and the pants couldn't fall. From time to time, he would tug at his pants. Shin-Luo seemed to notice it. He frowned and said, "What are you wearing?" "What are you wearing?" "Go and change." "I have no clothes." Shin-Manting said confidently, "I used to weigh 120 kilos, but now I'm less than 50 kilos. I'm all big now. I'm not small anymore." Shin-Manting was tall. She was 168 centimeters tall and had a voluptuous figure, especially her breasts. One could tell at a glance that they were heavy. At this moment, Shin-Luo looked at it. Indeed, it seemed to have shrunk. Shin-Manting noticed his gaze and glared at him. "What are you looking at?" "I have a belt in the bathroom. Put it on yourself." "I don't need it." Shin-Manting quickly returned to the nanny's room and changed into a long dress. Although it was a little wide, it still looked quite fitting. Nanny he watched from the side and continued to work. A smile quietly spread across her face. My goodness, he's finally enlightened. These few days of brainwashing weren't in vain. Chapter 2018. Got it, Shin-Manting replied. She took the baby from him and stuffed the large backpack into his arms. Shin-Luo raised his eyebrows slightly and didn't care. When they arrived at the mall, Shin-Manting found a stroller in the trunk of the car. She stuffed the baby and baby supplies into it and went straight to the baby's exclusive floor. Shin-Manting didn't think that the baby lacked anything before, but when she arrived at the mall, she felt that everything was useful. She asked the shop assistant to carry the shopping baskets and added one after another. After a while, there were 2 big baskets. When she paid the bill, it cost nearly 20,000 yuan. Enchanting was shocked and exclaimed, "Baby things are so expensive now." The shop assistant smiled and said, "Yes, babies are weak, so everything has to be the best." As he spoke, he looked at the baby in Enchanting's arms and said, "Especially for such a small baby, his immunity is relatively low. If the products aren't used well, he might get sick. Our brand is very good, and many celebrities like to use our products." That's right. When Enchanting heard this, she actually felt that it made sense. But it was a little too expensive. It seemed that she didn't buy much in total. There were a few milk bottles, other baby disinfection cabinets, and other miscellaneous things. There weren't many big things, and they were all miscellaneous small things. Seeing Shen Luo and swipe the card, her heart ached a little. Shen Luo and glanced at her and saw her obviously distressed expression. He said, "I didn't ask you to pay for it. I bought it for my son. Why are you distressed?" Uffed. Enchanting rolled her eyes at him and then walked away with the baby in her arms. "Go back. What's the hurry?" Shen Luo and signed and then looked at the shop assistant. "We'll pick it up later." "Okay." The shop assistant smiled brightly. "Then I'll pack it for you first. Remember to come back later." "Okay." Shen Luo and pushed the small stroller away. Enchanting turned around and said, "Hand me the milk bottle." Shen Luo and bent down and handed it to her after finding it. Enchanting fed the baby as she walked and asked, "What else do you want to buy?" "To the 3rd floor." "The 3rd floor?" Enchanting looked at him strangely. "That's the women's section. I'll buy you a few. Look at what you're wearing." Shen Luo and looked as if he couldn't bear to look at her. "Those who don't know might think you're pregnant again. How are you going to answer them when they ask?" Enchanting, "Moreover, it's obviously an old dress. I'm too embarrassed to tell others that you're my son's mother." Shen Luo and stepped into the elevator in disgust and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. Enchanting was still standing at the door, looking indignant. "Still not coming in?" Only then did Enchanting walk in with the baby in her arms. In this shopping mall, consumption was the first line. Even though he didn't buy many baby products, he still spent so much money. Of course, the quality of women's clothing was not low either. Shen Luo and walked into the store that Enchanting used to like. As soon as he walked in, he saw a dress that was popular this season. "This looks good," he said. Enchanting, who was standing behind them, guessed that the dress probably cost a few thousand yuan. She looked at Shen Luo and said weakly, "I think my clothes are pretty good. Let's go. Go and give it a try." Shen Luo and took the baby over and held the bottle. Enchanting was stuffed with a piece of clothing, and she felt very unconfident. Chapter 2019. The waiter quickly came up and said, "This is our new collection for this season. It just arrived and shows off your figure." As he spoke, he had already taken off the dress and said, "Try it on. It must look good on you. You have such a good figure." Enchanting looked at the dress and felt a little tempted. The pink dress made her look thin and beautiful. One look and you could tell that it was a small size. She didn't even dare to think about it. In the past, she used to wear large sizes. She carried the dress and reluctantly entered the fitting room. She quietly looked at the tag and was shocked. Hundreds of thousands, 4,800. Enchanting's hands were trembling. It was so expensive. If she was still working in her previous job, she would have to eat or drink for a month to wear this dress. Shen Luo and had just paid 20,000 yuan, and this dress, but it was really beautiful. After seeing the price, Enchanting wanted to try it on. After all, it was free to try it on. Enchanting hesitated for a moment and put it on. She put it on and zipped it up. Her hair, which had been tied up to make it easier to carry the child, became messy in an instant. She simply took it off and let her long black hair fall over her shoulders. When she opened the door and walked out, the waiter exclaimed, "Wow!" Shen Luo and heard the noise and turned to look. His eyes lit up and stared straight at her. Enchanting was obviously much thinner than before, but she still had the parts that should be there. Her waist was slender, her breasts were full, and her whole figure was perfect. Her hair was loose, and she looked like she had returned to the old Shin-manting, the high-spirited, proud, and sweet Shin-manting. However, the Shin-manting who had calmed down made him feel even more sorry for her. Shin-manting also couldn't believe it. She looked at herself in the mirror and couldn't believe it either. But this dress was too expensive. I'll take this one. Try these two. Shin-luo and brought her a few dresses, including a skirt and pants. The waiter took them with a smile and said, "Okay, then I'll bring new goods from the warehouse. Please wait a moment." Shin-manting felt guilty. She walked over and gently touched his back. She pulled his sleeve and said, "That dress costs 5,000 yuan. It's too expensive. Let's go to another store." Shin-luo and glanced at her face and said, "What are you afraid of? I didn't ask you to pay for it." As he spoke, he gave her a push. "I'll have to bring you along when I go out in the future. Are you trying to embarrass me by wearing that?" These words seemed to contain a lot of information. Shin-manting was stunned. Before she could react, Shin-luo nudged her and said, "Help her get changed." The waiter quickly responded and came over. "I'll do it myself." Shin-manting stood in front of her and took the clothes from her hands. However, every time he changed a set, Shin-luo would only say one word, "I want it." Shin-manting thought he was crazy. She gritted her teeth and asked, "Did you get rich?" "No." Shin-luo smiled. "But I can afford to buy a few clothes." Shin-luo Shin-manting stamped her foot and said anxiously, "I won't return it to you. So much money." The clothes in this shop were very expensive. She used to be reluctant to buy so much. Now that he suddenly gave her so much, Shin-manting felt her heart bleeding. Although it wasn't her money that was being spent, it was indeed a lot of money that was flowing out. Chapter 2020. Was stunned when she heard this. She looked up and saw Shin-luo's expression. At that moment, Shin-luo seemed to be looking at her with an indescribable softness in his eyes. She subconsciously took a step back, and then Shin-luo said, "Go and change them. If you don't like them, then don't want them." "Don't like them? How can I not like them? They're so beautiful." Shin-manting took the clothes into the fitting room, and when she came out again, she looked completely different. Shin-luo was very satisfied with his taste. He nodded and said, "I'll take them." "No, I don't like them very much, so I don't want them." The attendant smiled and nodded. "Okay, I'll wrap up the previous ones for you." "Okay." Shin-luo answered before Shin-manting could say anything. The attendant was very happy and quickly asked her colleagues to bring out the goods. After checking and packing them one by one, they took out all of them. There were a total of 8 bags, which cost more than 30,000 yuan. Shin-manting felt her heart twitch when she saw the number and said, "Shin-luo, hold the baby." Shin-luo handed the baby over. Little Moon was already asleep, and his little white and tender fists were clenched. Shin-manting felt that she had had an incredible day. She turned back and looked at Shin-luo, who was swiping his credit card, and her heart was pounding. She knew that Shin-luo was rich, but she couldn't afford so much money. It was just a few clothes. Did he have to spend so much? He was a prodigal. Shin-luo signed, and when he left with the bags, he saw Shin-manting in a daze. "Let's go." Shin-manting came back to her senses and followed him out. Shin-luo hung the bags directly on the stroller's handle and slowly pushed the stroller back to the 7th floor. The baby products were all packed, and the driver was already in place. When he saw them coming, he quickly sent them to the garage. Shin-luo and the driver put everything in place, while Shin-manting sat in the car. When they finished, she had been in a daze for a long time. When he returned to the driver's seat, Shin-luo started the car steadily and glanced at Shin-manting. Shin-manting held the baby in her arms and didn't dare to speak. After a while, she couldn't help but say, "These clothes are too expensive. It doesn't matter. I'll deduct it from your salary." Shin-luo held onto the steering wheel. He seemed to be in a good mood. "What do you want to eat? Are we still going to eat? The baby has been out for a long time. Of course we have to eat. How can we take care of the child if we don't eat?" Shin-luo glanced at her. "Let's eat Hunan cuisine. I haven't had it in a long time." "Hunan cuisine," Shin-manting gulped. She also had not eaten for a long time. He lowered his head and didn't say anything else. Shinluo and carried the baby in his arms and put on the baby supplies. The baby woke up as soon as he got out of the car. He opened his eyes wide and looked around. As expected, Shin Manting went to the maternity ward first. Sure enough, the baby had diarrhea. After wiping his butt and changing his diaper, she carried the baby into the dining room. Shinluo and had already begun ordering dishes. She heard a few of them: mushu pork, crispy and tender spotted chicken, mushroom yolkless egg. Shin Manting almost drooled. She held the baby in her arms and lowered her head. She was in a great mood. Chapter 2021. Okay. Shin Manting put the baby back in the stroller, and soon the dishes were served. Shinluo and didn't eat much spicy food, but Shin Manting liked it very much. He ordered a lot of spicy dishes, and they smelled so good. Shin Manting ate happily, but Shinluo and couldn't stand it anymore. He kept drinking water and inhaling air. Shin Manting glanced at him and said with a smile, "It's no use. You're already like this after eating so little." Shinluo and didn't say anything. He picked up a piece of spicy meat with his chopsticks and stuffed it into his mouth. He drank water while stuffing it and said calmly, "It's quite delicious. It was just a little spicy." Shin Manting silently looked at his flushed face and bright red lips. She pursed her lips and didn't expose him, but she already had a mocking smile on her face. Shinluo and saw it, and his expression became even calmer. He silently moved his chopsticks to other dishes that weren't spicy. Shin Manting laughed while eating. Even she herself didn't realize how wonderful her mood was at this moment. After the meal, the two of them took the children home. It was already past 1 o'clock in the afternoon when they arrived home. This was the time when the desire for a nap was strongest. Shin Manting felt sleepy after changing the baby's diaper and feeding him milk. After coaxing the baby to sleep, she came back to her senses and found Shinluo and doing something in the room. Shin Manting knocked on the door twice, and after a while, she opened the door and walked in. Shinluo and sat on the edge of the bed with a notebook on his knees. His fingers were typing quickly. "Where's work?" Shin Manting quietly walked in and put the baby in the small crib. Shinluo glanced at her and said, "I'm going out for a while. Look after the baby." "About work?" "Yes, a new drug has been developed recently, and Lao has an appointment for dinner." "Oh," Shin Manting replied. She felt a little strange. Lao Wu was his partner, but most of the drug development was handled by Shinluo and himself, and Lao Wu was responsible for marketing and communication. Why did Shinluo have to do it himself now? Shinluo seemed to see through her doubts and explained, "I'm the main person in charge, and only I know a lot of the principles." "But didn't you just finish eating?" "The dinner is at night. I have to go back to the lab now." He turned off the computer and placed it at the foot of the bed. He stood up and said, "Take care of the child. I'll probably be back later." "Oh, let's go." Shin Manting felt a little uncomfortable and muttered, "Why are you telling me?" It was as if he was telling her something. What was there to explain? She didn't have a good relationship with him. The corners of Shinluo's lips curled up slightly, and he quickly walked to the cloakroom. He picked out a suit and changed into it with a swagger. He didn't seem to mind Shin Manting's presence. Shin Manting turned around awkwardly and put away the baby's milk bottle with her back to him. She held 3 to 5 milk bottles in one hand and was about to leave the room when she happened to catch a glimpse of Shinluo taking off his shirt. Shinluo's skin was very fair, and he looked gentle and delicate. Her cheeks flushed, and she opened the door and went to the kitchen. After washing all the milk bottles, Shinluo came out in a formal suit. He glanced at her and said, "I'm leaving." Shin Manting didn't say anything, but her heart inexplicably pounded. Looking in the direction of his departure, she muttered, "Just leave. It's none of my business." Chapter 2022. Nanny walked in from outside and smiled when she saw the scene. They seemed to be getting along well today. She was finally enlightened. She walked over with a smile and asked, Are you used to being back for a few days? Yes. Shin Manting replied and glanced at Nanny He. I'm fine. We're quite familiar with each other. It's nothing. That's good. Nanny He's smile widened and said, Eldest young master looks much better with you here. He looks energetic today, as if he's married. Shin Manting felt that Nanny He's words had a hidden meaning. She smiled and didn't reply. The baby has obviously behaved a lot these days. I don't see him crying anymore. He used to throw tantrums when I held him. He was very angry, just like his father. Nanny He took over and helped her rinse the bottles. But he's better now. Oh, by the way, I saw Old Yang bring back a few boxes of things. They say baby products. Were they? They're for the baby. Shin Manting seemed to have just remembered. Pack up the bottles. I'll go get them. Okay, go ahead. Nanny He looked at her with a smile. Remember to teach me how to use the machines. Shin Manting agreed with a smile. She quickly wiped her hands and unpacked all the baby products she had just bought. The bottles, the disinfectant cabinet, and some other things were in a mess. When she was done, she asked Nanny He to help her wash the bottles and then went to install the disinfectant cabinet. There used to be a disinfectant cabinet at home, but the baby's things were getting more and more and more. In addition, Shin Manting also found a room. The room was empty. It used to be her room. Now she asked Nanny He to help her clean up and put the baby products in it. It was already evening when she was finally done. The baby woke up twice and went back to sleep after feeding. Shin Manting was sleepy. When Nanny He went to cook, she took a nap in the baby's room. However, she didn't sleep for long before she heard Nanny He calling her. Shin Manting thought she was dreaming at first, so she didn't pay much attention. Unexpectedly, after a while, she heard old Mrs. Shun's voice. She was startled and immediately opened her eyes. In a flash, the door was opened. When old Mrs. Shun saw Shin Manting, her face was filled with excitement. She looked at her and stomped her foot. Manting, you're finally back. Old Mrs. Shun's loud voice startled Shin Manting, who hadn't fully woken up yet. She quivered and immediately woke up. But before she could react, she saw the old lady walking towards her. Her arms were wide open and she was about to hug her. Shin Manting felt a little uncomfortable after being hugged. She called out, Grandma. Hey, hey, hey. Old Mrs. Shun's eyes were filled with tears. She sniffled and shouted, It's good that you're back. Grandma missed you so much. Shin Manting was flattered and felt a little out of breath from his embrace. She reached out and pushed the baby. Then, she heard the sound of the baby crying. Old Mrs. Shun immediately loosened her grip and said, Look at me. I scared little Moon. Old Mrs. Shun's eyes were filled with tears. She looked at Shin Manting and said, That's great. Little Moon has a mother now. Shin Manting hurriedly stood up and went to carry the baby over. Chapter 2023. Whoa. She looked at Shin Manting, who was pouting and had tears in her eyes. Old Mrs. Shun was unhappy and joked, Look at this little guy. He knows how to act like a spoiled child now that he has a mother. He used to know how to open his mouth and cry. Shin Manting didn't know why, but when she heard that, she felt a surge of satisfaction. The baby seemed to understand old Mrs. Shun's words. He stopped pouting and opened his mouth to respond. Old Mrs. Shun smiled and felt very emotional. He's finally back. The baby will be very happy in the future with his mother by his side. Grandma. Shin Manting looked at the old lady and felt a little guilty. What happened before? Old Mrs. Shun was stunned for a moment before she realized that she was probably referring to the incident before the new year when she went to pick her up but returned empty-handed. She smiled warmly and said, Don't apologize. I understand, but you're not allowed to leave again. If you leave, our family will be incomplete. Shin Manting's heart trembled slightly. She thought she had heard wrong and looked at her. Old Mrs. Shun stepped forward and put her hand on Yi Qianqian's shoulder. She said, No matter what your identity is, you are a part of our family. This will never change. I will always be your grandmother. Do you hear me? These words. How could she have never known that her grandmother could be so emotional? Shin Manting couldn't help but nod with tears in her eyes. Old Mrs. Shun was overjoyed. When she saw Shin Manting's reaction, she laughed and said, "Grandma bought a lot of things. Let me show you." Old Mrs. Shun and old Mrs. Dongfang's trip seemed to be very fruitful. She took out a lot of things and kept bragging to Shin Manting. Shin Manting was confused, but she nodded in agreement. Nanny was very relieved when she saw it. Shin Longyue and Mrs. Shun came back from work together and had a happy meal with the family. It was said that Shun Jilie and Yi Qianqian had gone to Yintown the day before. It was estimated that it would be some time before they returned to the capital. After dinner, old Mrs. Shun chatted with Shun Longyue, Mrs. Shun, and Shin Manting for a long time. They didn't leave until 9 o'clock in the evening. Shin Manting had just taken a shower and played with the baby for a while when she heard her phone ring. It was Shen Luo. Shin Manting glanced at the time. It was already past 10 o'clock. Why didn't he go home? Why did he call her at this hour? When he picked up the phone, he heard the noise of people on the other end. But she did not hear Shin Luo's voice. Shin Manting frowned and called out, "Shin Luo?" After a few seconds, someone replied, Manting." The drunken voice belonged to Shin Luo. Shin Manting had a bad feeling about this. "Are you drunk?" "I'm not drunk," Shin Luo said. "I just had a few drinks and can't drive anymore. Come and pick me up." When Shin Manting heard this, she subconsciously glanced at the baby in her arms. "I'm at home looking after the baby. Why don't you call a designated driver?" "Ew. If you don't pick me up, I can't go back." Shin Luo was so drunk that he could barely speak. "Why? You can take a taxi back. Just leave the car there and drive it back tomorrow." Shin Manting looked at the time. "Is it far from home?" Chapter 2024. Shin Manting felt as if her heart had been struck by something suddenly. It sank suddenly and was so heavy that it rippled. A strange feeling suddenly surrounded her. It was extremely subtle. "Who's your wife?" Shin Manting retorted, but her voice was not loud and soon disappeared. Hearing her reaction, Shin Luo laughed foolishly and said, "Come quickly. They've found me. If you don't come, I'll be drunk to death here." "Old Shun, you're not being kind. You've only drunk a little and you're calling for help." The clear and loud voice was obviously much more sober than Shin Luo. "I'm at Yin on Chanda Road." However, before she could hear more, the phone was hung up. Shin Manting looked at the baby in her arms and hesitated for a moment before she went to Shun Longyue's room. Knock, knock. After a long time, someone opened the door. Mrs. Shun was sleepy. When she saw Shin Manting, she calmed down and asked, "What's wrong?" Shin Manting told her the whole story and then said, "Why don't you go and pick him up? Or you can ask Dad to go." Shin Manting was a little anxious and didn't notice how she addressed him. Mrs. Shun's face softened, but she remained calm and said, "He went out to socialize and was forced to drink. It's unreasonable for his parents to pick him up. How do you think he'll face his friends in the future? Of course, you should go." Then, she looked at the baby in her arms and said, "I'll look after the baby. You go." Mrs. Shun's words made sense, but Shin Manting still felt that something was wrong. After thinking about it, she nodded. She handed the baby to her and said worriedly, "It's almost time for the baby to drink milk. Give it to him in 10 minutes. "Okay, then I'll go and change first." Because she had just taken a shower, Shin Manting was wearing pajamas. Now that she was ready to go out, she went back to the nanny's room. She took out the clothes she bought today and picked out a dress. But after thinking about it, it was a dinner party after all, and the people drinking there were all men. What if someone was drunk and messed around? No way. She rummaged around and found a pantsuit that Shin Luo had chosen for her. After putting it on, she felt much better. She put on her shoes, carried her bag, took a small comb, and combed her hair before walking out. She took a taxi and soon arrived at Chanda Road. She told the driver about Misty Cloud, and the driver took her to Misty Cloud Dream. Yin Rumeng was a luxurious high-end entertainment venue, with restaurants and entertainment as one. She called Shin Luo in, but no one answered. She walked up in her high heels. When she made another call, she saw a familiar man from afar. He looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He was slightly plump and wore a pair of glasses. He looked quite gentle. But now his face was red, and he looked a little drunk. Lao Wu. Shen Manting walked over and called out, "Where's Shun Luo-un?" Lao Wu looked up and saw Shen Manting. He found her familiar. After a while, he remembered who she was and said, "Oh, Manting, you've changed so much that I almost couldn't recognize you." Shen Manting could only smile and ask again, "Where is Shun Luo-un?" "He's still in there. These people are too good at drinking. I can't beat them." Shen Manting waved his hand and looked like he was about to vomit. Shen Manting took a step back and frowned. Shen Manting took a rest for a while, then said drunkenly, "Let's go and save Shun." He stumbled forward and mumbled, "It's not the same, it's not the same." As soon as they entered the private room, there was a strong smell of cigarettes and alcohol. Someone was singing, and the table was full of good food and wine. Shen Luo-un was lying on the table, holding a bottle of white wine in his hand. "Shun, your woman is here to pick you up," Shen Manting said in a loud voice. Shen Luo-un immediately raised his head and saw Shen Manting from afar. He grinned and said, "She's here." As he said that, he supported himself with the bottle and tried to stand up. But his body went limp, and he almost fell again. Shen Manting quickly went up and held him steadily. Shen Luo-un slightly turned sideways and hugged her waist. Shen Manting was suddenly hugged, and her whole body tightened. Then, Shen Luo-un buried his face in her gorgeous hair and inhaled deeply. Shen Manting's face turned red, and she took a step back. She whispered anxiously, "What are you doing? There's so many people." "Hey, if you want to be intimate, go home." A fat man who looked like a boss waved his hand in disgust. "How much did you drink? This genius can't hold his liquor well. Take him away." Shen Luo-un didn't seem to hear it. He was a little intoxicated and said with a smile, "I missed you so much." Shen Manting's face was a little hot. She pushed his face away and said, "Let go." Shen Luo-un didn't let go. He reached out and put his hand on her shoulder to help her stand up. "How much did you drink? You like this?" Shen Manting frowned and dragged him up. Shen Luo-un's feet were a little unstable, and then his whole body almost fell on top of her. He looked thin, but he was a man after all, and his weight was not light. Shen Manting staggered under his weight, but she soon straightened up and said angrily, "Why did you drink so much? It was delicious." "Hey, you're too fierce." Lao Wu laughed. "Old Shun also has such a day. Women should be gentle. Although old Shun is easy to bully, don't bully your man like this. There are so many people here. You can go home and do whatever you want behind closed doors." "Ha, you don't say." Maybe she looks fierce, but she is very gentle in the room. Otherwise, how could old Shun be defeated by her? Shen Manting's face flushed with embarrassment as they teased each other. She stopped talking and put Shen Luo-un's hand on her shoulder. Then, she carried him out of the room. The people in the private room continued to drink, laughing as they watched their backs. Shen Luo-un was drunk. When he heard their words, the thirst in his heart became stronger. He glanced at Shen Manting's face. It was pink and very tempting. Shen Luo-un's eyes were fixed on her. He blinked and looked at her, licking his lips. But soon he forced himself to turn his head, as if to hypnotize himself, and said, "Let's go home." Shen Manting supported him and muttered, "You can't drink. Why did you drink so much? I still have to serve you when we go home. You'll be in trouble if the baby is affected by the smell of alcohol." Shen Luo-un chuckled. Shen Manting was puzzled by his laughter and asked, "Where's the car?" "In the garage. -1 and -2. 2. When they arrived at the garage, Shen Manting held the key for a long time before she found the car. She helped him into the front passenger seat, then went to the driver's seat and buckled the seatbelt for him. However, she accidentally met his hazy and blurred eyes. Shen Luo-un licked his lips. In a flash, he reached out and pinched her chin. He slightly tilted his head and kissed her lips. "It's the end of the month. Don't waste your monthly tickets. Give them to me. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.